IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Shaun. I'm Bryan. We are ready to get rocking and rolling with today's RTCF show. We appreciate y'all's patience. Also, I've had some funky start times this week. It's been a very busy couple weeks for me and my family, and so we appreciate y'all's patience, and thank you for Shaun and Trevor for filling in for me these last couple weeks as we are working through some things over here. But we are here, Shaun, at 2:00, ready to rock and roll. Better late than never, right? And we're going to talk about some fun topics today. Shaun and I have some very interesting topics. We've been wanting to do one of these topics for a couple weeks now, but I've been on the show. Today we'll be able to. We're going to talk Chicago recruiting and Notre Dame and kind of what's going on in Chicago right now. And is Notre Dame going to benefit from it? Should they benefit from it? So we'll talk a little Chicago recruiting because there's going to be a big game tonight in Chicago that Shaun's going to be at. And it's some big-time names and several Notre Dame prospects. And then when we get to the teams section of the show, Shaun, we're going to talk about, is this Notre Dame offense elite to the point where it can carry the team to a deep playoff run in the manner in which it did last season from the defense? And so we're going to talk about that. And, is this offense as good as we think it is? Is it a byproduct of just playing bad teams and you're doing what good teams do against bad teams? Can they sustain it? Is it real elite play, especially considering what Notre Dame has left on the schedule? And it's just going to be an interesting conversation, Shaun. And what, if it is elite, what makes it elite? And so we're going to have some fun talking about that. And then, Shaun and I are talking about all these different topics, before the show about, college football topics that we'd like to talk about. And we kind of settled on one, and Shaun thought, like, what have we really learned in college football? Because we're going over, we're talking about the portal and quarterbacks and all these different things, and we're like, there's kind of a lot right now that we've really learned, and a lot of things, some things we knew or thought we knew, some things it's like, well, didn't see that coming. So we're going to talk about that. So what have we learned in college football at the third of the way through the season mark? And that's what part 3 of today's show will be. So no mailbag today. If you want us to address something or talk about something, you can go ahead and throw a super chat in there. But right now, Shaun, we are going to talk about Chicago recruiting. You have been very busy this fall, going to high school football games every Friday, and it seems every Friday you're going somewhere to see a player that we know about. And you and I will talk about that player, but then there's always some other kid in 27 or 28 or 29. You're like, yo, I saw this kid, and this kid is really good. And then I reach out to people that I know, and you find out that Notre Dame is well aware of these young men, and they're talking to these young men. And so what we're seeing, Shaun, or at least I think we're seeing, is potentially a resurgence in the Chicago area when it comes to producing big-time football players. For those who are older, even older than me, people that grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the city of Chicago used to be an absolute it was the home of Notre Dame recruiting. It was for the University of Notre Dame what Miami is for the University of Miami, or maybe what Dallas is for Texas recruiting, and what LA is for USC recruiting. It used to be that big, Shaun. There would be years they would sign a dozen more players from the city of Chicago. There's times they'd sign 4 or 5 kids from one school. And it wasn't just because, back then you could offer more scholarships, but then you'd go look and you'd see, you kind of look at the teams, right? Like, or the how those guys would develop. And then you realize, like, okay, these aren't just guys they're signing because they're local guys. Like, these are like some of their best players. You go look at the 1988 title team, and you'll see a heavy Notre Dame influence, especially along the lines, and a lot from the city of Chicago. So we're going to talk about that, Shaun, because Notre Dame doesn't really have a base area like a lot of other people, because the state of Indiana will produce some kids, but not to the degree that you see in Ohio or Pennsylvania or Florida or Georgia or Texas, Louisiana for other schools. Chicago, being that type of city again in recruiting, could give Notre Dame finally that base if they could take advantage, Shaun. So, the first thing to talk about when you look at Chicago recruiting is, right now, people keep talking about, should Notre Dame try to flip some big-time 2027 player or 2026 wide receivers based on how the offense is playing? And my response is always, no, they need to focus on 27. And when you look forward immediately, there's one player in particular, and we're going to talk about a couple others in the 27 class already in Chicago that are absolute must-get players. And I think it really starts with Quentin Burrell from Mount Carmel. I think that's really where you look and say, if Notre Dame is going to start producing Chicago products, and if Notre Dame is going to start, if Chicago is going to start becoming sort of that feeder program to Notre Dame again, where Notre Dame's winning championships because of Chicago, when kids like Quentin Burrell come along, you have to get them. I think that's the first and foremost when you talk about Chicago and Notre Dame. There's several others as we're going to dive into, because we're not going to be talking about Chicago based on just one kid. But when you talk about the list, that's absolutely right there at the top where you have to start.
Yo, he's a man, top 50, on the verge of possibly being a 5-star in the 2027 class. Through 5 games, he has 30 receptions, 559 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. I'm going to say that again. Through 5 games, he has 10 touchdowns. That's some Jadarian Price type value on touches, touchdown per touch.
And how many times, Shaun, have you told me when we've talked after games that he played the first half?
Yeah, he hasn't played. Yeah, because they're blowing teams out. They're averaging over 40 points. I think they're averaging close to 44 points per game. They're blowing everybody out. The closest game they had was their opener on the road in Ohio against Archbishop Moeller. That's I believe that's who played the nickel?
Carson Hobbs is from
there. Carson Hobbs is from there.
Elijah Taylor.
And Elijah Taylor.
Yeah, it's a big-time program.
So it's a big-time program. That was their closest game. They won it in Dover OT with Quentin Burrell taking in the game-winning 2-point conversion. So that right there just lets you know. 819 all-purpose yards. That lets you know he has special teams value. The greatest thing about him is his route running. It's one of the things you pointed out when we both watched him at the Irish Invasion. We were impressed, like, yo, he's a bigger wide receiver, especially his bottom half. And you said, man, I just want to see him clean up a few things with his route running in and out of his breaks. And I don't know if he heard you, but he's definitely cleaned up some things. Joe, just watching the 2 or 3, and you see his early tape from this season. He is one of those guys, like you said, he's a must get, right? Just because being this close, having an opportunity to grab, I think the last time they had an opportunity to grab a receiver of this magnitude was probably in that 23 class with Carnell Tate. It was similar, like get a 5-star caliber wide receiver right out of Chicago. They had that opportunity. They missed out on Carnell Tate. Now you get another opportunity with Quentin Burrell. He has a relationship with Mike Brown going back to when Mike Brown was at Wisconsin. So there's that connection as well. You saw their rapport at the Irish Invasion, how he was coaching them hard, and he talked about loving that and receiving that. And then he visited for Texas A&M. And one of the things that stood out in my conversation, not only in the immediate aftermath of the Texas A&M visit, but even talking to him leading up to this big game against Brother Rice on tonight. After the game, he said he loved the big plays and explosive plays he saw from the passing offense, but he just wished that they passed the ball more. And after he said that, he said, but I know it's coming. And I'm like, okay. And so I reached back out to him this week after the Arkansas game, and he said, I told you it was coming. So that lets you know that he's keyed in on what Notre Dame is actually doing week to week. So that's a great sign for where Notre Dame stands with the number 1 player in the 2027 class out of Illinois and ranked 49th overall according to ESPN.
Shaun, I'm going to quickly just kind of give a little bit of a history lesson here, because I actually went back and looked at some of the rosters. And if you look at like the 1993 team, which we would argue prior to last season was the last time Notre Dame had a truly elite team, like a truly elite, like this is as good, best team in the country. These are just some of the names from the Chicago area: Pete Bursich, Oliver Gibson, Brian Hamilton, Ronaldo Wynn, Bryant Farmer, and by the way, this young man named Bryant Young. I don't know if you remember him. He was a pretty good player back in the day, NFL Hall of Famer. Son currently plays for the Irish. This is what that area is. I'm looking back at the 1989 roster, Shaun, and just kind of going through that. And you look at like the late Jeff Alm is from the Chicago area. This is the 1989 team. He was from the Chicago area. It's a little harder to work through those because there's so many more. But you had Tom Gorman, you had Tim Grunards from Chicago. Craig Hentrick was from outside of Chicago. He was from the Chicago area. Mirko Jerkovic was from outside the Chicago area. Lindsey Knapp was from Deerfield, not too far from the in the Chicago area. So, we obviously Chris Zorich was a guy that was from the Chicago area. So again, this is an area that it used to be an area where Notre Dame was able. Stance Magala was not too far outside of Chicago. Burbank's not too far outside of Chicago.
Burbank is right on the border of the southwest side of Chicago. It's right on the border.
So it's like one of those suburb areas, right? And then of course Chris Zorich was another guy from that area, and we just haven't seen the area produce that high level of players as consistently. There have certainly been guys that have come through, and then some of those guys that are from there, Notre Dame doesn't get. Think of Taylor, obviously from last year, but it's not just in 2027. It's not just Quentin Burrell either, Shaun. There's another young man you've been out to see multiple times, who's visited Notre Dame multiple times, that I think is another must-get player in the 2027 class. Now, they're in a bit of a battle right now for him. Obviously, Illinois is making a hard push as well. But Braden Parks is another player that is a Chicago area kid that could make or break this defensive line class for Notre Dame in 2027. Shaun, let's talk about him and just kind of the latest with him.
And once again, that's why this battle tonight between Brother Rice and Mark Carmel is such a titanic battle, a battle of titans, if you want to say that way. He hasn't played in second halves much at all. They've been blowing teams out. That Brother Rice is just that good. They're a much more balanced team. They were always a great defensive team, but the offense is kind of leveled off, or leveled up, shall I say, and met the challenge of making them a more balanced team. He is down after down. They have a great rotation in front. We'll talk about some people they've recruited and some other people on the defensive line along with him in the 28 class that they're recruiting in a few minutes. But Braden Parks is a must get. Why? He's already multiple, can play both inside positions and can play them well, right? If he needs to play the nose, King Liggins is a guy that Notre Dame was looking at that committed eventually to Illinois. Sometimes they kick King Liggins in and allow him to be 3 technique. And so Braden Parks would just kick over to that nose and just go up against double teams, destroy double teams. He is a great pass rusher on the interior. He loves getting upfield. And, man, his quickness and the way once he gets upfield, there's not many quarterbacks, of course, the high school level, there's not many quarterbacks that when they get within a 2-yard radius of him, that he doesn't get his hands on and get them to the ground. And so that's something, and running backs for that matter. So when you watch him play, like I said, his efficiency of being able to be a game wrecker without the snaps, he's maybe getting 25 to 30 snaps a game. Maybe right now. He's going to play 4 quarters tonight. I guarantee that. He's going to play 4 quarters tonight. But he's been getting probably 25 to 30 snaps per game because they rotate like every 3 or 4 downs. They rotate in. They definitely recruit that position of defensive line because they're a defensive program. Their head coach was a defensive coordinator on the college level. So you talk about must get, and you talk about his connection to Notre Dame that already exists with his connection to Chris Zorich and the legacy. And Brother Rice, the coaching staff, the staffers I've spoken to, having time to talk to them on the sidelines, the Notre Dame banner in that situation, and some of the other kids in the 28 class is definitely very present. Definitely very present. And from their standpoint, they have the feeling that Notre Dame's going to do everything within their power to make sure that Braden Parks ends up being a part of the Fighting Irish program. That's the way they feel it. So that you feel good knowing that Notre Dame is really coming after this young man, and they feel like he's a top priority. I have no clue why he hasn't gotten his 4th star yet. I don't know. I don't know if they're waiting on. If you just saw him and Cameron Wagner go back and forth at it at the end of the Irish invasion, catching punts. Like if you just watch this young man trying to catch punts, it's like great hands. Like he's just a great athlete at his size, And then he's a guy that maybe comes in and adds 10 to 15 pounds of muscle because he's already at like 305. But he's ready-made.
He's the kind of kid too, Shaun, that I think once he gets into a college strength program is going to really take off even more. When you look at Braden, I think he's going to thrive. He's in a good strength program now at the high school level. It's more so getting into that college strength and nutrition program, especially. And then just as his body starts to physically mature, because you look at Braden, he's still kind of got a bit of a, he's a bit of a baby, you know, and I mean that just physically, like his body hasn't even really taken off the way that I think it's going to take off. And that's something that gets you fired up. And actually there's 4 kids from Chicago, actually, now that I think about it, in the 2027 class, because for a second there, I was forgetting about Cameron Wagner, who's another kid that's outside of the Chicago area, but in the area. So let's talk about Cameron Wagner also. You talked about how well Braden Parks performed this summer. Well, at the lineman camp, Cameron Wagner was the MVP. And he's a player that obviously Notre Dame has taken a big interest in. Massive young man, Shaun. Big player. And I don't mean like big player like, oh, he's important to Notre Dame. I mean, he is a massive young man, Cameron Wagner. And he's kind of like a lot of those Notre Dame kids we've seen in recent years, Shaun, where he's not just like, he's not fat. He's just big. You know, I mean, just lower body, calves are like this big around. He's another player that Notre Dame has clearly made a priority, but so have teams like Texas A&M and some other big-time national programs. That's going to be another battle for Notre Dame that they're going to have to fight hard to win, but he's another must-get out of the Chicago area in the 2027 class. And that's the thing, is there's 4 players that I view as legit 4-star players, a couple of them top 100 caliber players that are from right down the street. You got to get them. And Cam Wagner's one of those, and we'll talk about the 4th one here coming up when you're done talking about Cam Wagner. Because I know you and Cam were talking about communicate about Notre Dame and where he's at.
Cam Wagner, like you said, is really he's been to the campus, I think, 4 times now.
At least,
he's at a game day last year. He came back for the Texas A&M game, and coming into the game, he was talking about just being focused on the O-line and just seeing how dominant they can be. And they definitely had a better performance than they had the week before against Miami. So he did see a better performance. He saw the offense be productive, regardless of the outcome. I mean, he's watching 2 schools that are at the top of his list of schools. So it was a good chance for him to see and kind of compare. But his relationship with Joe Rudolph could definitely be something that's a deciding factor, because he has a really great relationship with Joe Rudolph and the staff, whether it be Carter Allman and some of the other staffers that he speaks so highly of. So when you talk about this young man, it's another big – I tell you this all the time, Bryan. I say every now and then, skill positions and quarterbacks, you'll find every 2 or 3 years, you'll find some guys that can play at Notre Dame. But I said every year in the trenches on both sides, you can load up. And every now and then you might get that elite 5-star dude, but at worst, you're going to get great depth, and you're going to set a really good floor for your offensive line and defensive line if you can get the best kids out of the Chicagoland area. And it seems like that's what Notre Dame is doing. And like you said, with Cameron Wagner, one of the things that is really happening is the 2 flags that always flew the highest in Chicago were Illinois and Notre Dame for a long time, especially going back to the 80s and 90s. And now those 2 flags are once again becoming as prominent as they were, because you had schools like Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon has snuck in here and gotten talent like Bucky Brooks just out of nowhere. You know, they get him out of the south suburbs, and all of a sudden he goes to Oregon and becomes a really good back, and he's playing really well for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Got some kids out of Chicago. I mean,
Ole Miss has gotten some kids.
They tried to get Niles Morgan. So
yep.
So, LSU came up and got Ethan Posick and Graham Posick, and so I mean the SEC schools. Alabama just got the tight. He's not. I don't think he's from Chicago, but the Max Suter kid from Illinois. He's not. That's not Chicago. Is that from?
No. Gavin Mueller. Gavin Mueller. Yeah, he's more south. Gavin Mueller is the kid. He's going to Colorado. That's another kid from the Chicagoland area that's highly recruited. So,
but you're seeing these schools, big time schools, come up to this region.
You're seeing them come up. Yeah,
which is why Notre Dame really has to make sure that they're on it.
And I can tell you the narrative has changed and it's grown year to year under Marcus Freeman. You know, the noise about Notre Dame has gotten louder and louder, and you need that, because it wasn't that there's a ton of support for Notre Dame amongst teachers, administrators, especially within the Catholic schools and in the public schools in the Chicagoland area and the surrounding areas. That's not the problem. The kids just didn't know.
Right.
The kids didn't know. They had not seen Notre Dame winning. They had not seen Notre Dame with a head coach that was very relatable to them. And that once that changed, now the eyes of the kids started being interested, and that started to shift things in the Chicagoland area. And now it's
Or
really at a
who even
fever
cared
pitch.
to make Chicago a priority. I mean, it's like
That
after
part.
the early, because like you look at like the Darius Fleming and Steve Filer who played for Brian Kelly, they weren't recruited by Brian Kelly. They were recruited by Charlie Weiss's staff. And so you are correct. It was way too long. I mean, we'd talk about this, Shaun, all the time. You and I have known each other over 10 years, and we'd sit there and we just kind of vent back and forth about why is Notre Dame not talking to the Chicago kid. And then they'd finally get on the kid, and he's like, yeah, dude, Ohio State's been talking to me for 3 months. And so it just, yeah, it's frustrating, but they're doing it. And I think that was a bit of an issue at the beginning of Marcus Freeman's tenure, but I think they've quickly in Marcus Freeman's tenure realized, like, okay, hey, Chicago's an area we have to do a better job of. And so now that the talent in the area is upgrading, in my opinion, and we'll talk about that here in a few, you're not now getting into Chicago. You've already been here. And I think that's going to get into it. I want to talk about another kid from the Chicago area, Shaun, because this is one that doesn't get as much attention. And I absolutely love this kid. He's one of my favorites in this class. Not that I think he's like, he's an elite 5-star kid, but I just love watching this kid play. I love his versatility. That's Tavares Harrington from Mount Carmel. This is another very talented player, teammate, obviously, of Quentin Burrell. They're from the same Mount Carmel, correct? Because there's another Mount Carmel in Chicago
That's Trey Taylor's team.
Right.
Quarterback Trey Taylor's team, yeah.
And so, but he is a teammate of Quentin Burrell. I love this kid, Shaun. He plays corner in high school. I think he's going to get a shot to play corner in college. He's 6'3". If he can't play corner, he can play safety. He's a very long, rangy athlete. I think he could play receiver. I mean, he doesn't do it they don't really need him to be a receiver at Mount Carmel because they've got Quinn Burrell. But just look at him play, and he looks a lot like that kind of guy, Shaun. Just love the athleticism, love the football aspects of it. And every time you and I have talked about him, he seems like he's just that Notre Dame type of kid as well, that he would fit in and thrive at Notre Dame in a lot of areas. Let's talk a little bit about Tavares Harrington and just kind of, what his thoughts are on Notre Dame and where things stand with him.
Well, one of the things, he visited for the Texas A&M game as well, and he's really a fast riser. His name really started popping this summer, in the recruiting ranks, and he started to gain a lot of offers and attention. And now it's at a fever pitch, and he, along with Quentin Burrell, their top schools are really all the same. They've been taking visits together. After the Notre Dame visit, they went down to Miami, and then they came back and did like an impromptu visit to Michigan. It was like a quick turnaround on a Sunday. So the same teams are coming after them. They have similar. Does that mean they're going to go to the same school? They're a package deal? I wouldn't say that necessarily. But the relationship with Mike Mickens, and the one thing that stands out when you go watch him play and you watch his film, I told you this, I go to high school games. I haven't seen coaching staffs allow a young man to travel like week to week. Identify who the best receiver is on the other team and just allow that young man to travel with their receiver the entire game. And that's something he's allowed to do. He was one of the kids that pointed out to me, like regardless of the outcome, I just love watching the way Coach Mickens allows his guys to play man and the different leverages and techniques that they use in coverage. So to let you know how he looks at the position and what he's watching. And he also has a great relationship with Ace Austin, who's another 27 defensive back, big-time defensive back out of Ohio, and Joshua Dobson, another 5-star defensive back. So they've known each other from 7-on-7, so he has a rapport with them, talks to them all the time. So they had a great time on that visit to Notre Dame. He talked about the time they spent together, the conversations they had about what they saw with the defensive backs. So that is one thing that stands out with all of these defensive backs. They love the fact that they can come to a place like Notre Dame where they know they're going to be allowed to play man because that's what they love to do. And like you said, he's played man. Well, I saw your little look there. I'm not even gonna poke you. I'm not even gonna poke you.
We're talking about Chicago recruiting right now, Shaun.
Oh man, I missed you on this show, buddy. But no, like you said, he's played corner, lockdown corner. He's played nickel. he's played safety. So
Yeah.
the versatility that he gives you to be able to do all three things and how he fits into a class. Because if you get a Joshua Dobson, let's say you get a Joshua Dobson and Ace Austin, and you say, well, man, we can work him into nickel and safety, or in certain packages, if he plays safety, we don't have to bring in a nickel. We could just move him down and maybe add another safety to the back end because you already have a deep group of safety. The safety room is already thick and young. So that is, something I think he would be a great piece to have for versatility purpose moving forward and how they want to develop that defensive backfield.
I would absolutely give him a shot to play corner. I think he's got really smooth hips for a 6'3" kid. He doesn't remind me as much of Leonard Moore as he does Cam Hart. He really reminds me a lot of Cam Hart in his movement. It almost looks like you say, is this kid like twitchy? Is he like fast? Because he's so long and so smooth that I think it masks how well he moves. Like I think that's the thing, Shaun, is sometimes those really long kids are just they're just got the easy athleticism that it almost kind of masks it. But the other thing too, Shaun, is it's not just 2027. Notre Dame's already getting involved with a bunch of 2028 kids. And I know one in particular you've seen recently that you like that Notre Dame is talking to more and more and more, and that's Jack McNamara, who is another kid he's a teammate of Braden Parks. So, the game you're going to tonight, Shaun, there's going to be a lot of Division I athletes at that list, but that's another name that Notre Dame fans need to get to know, as long as some other 28 kids, Shaun. So if you could just talk about Jack McNamara. I know you're very high. I called you a couple weeks ago. I was like, hey man, what do you think of Jack McNamara? I just got done watching this film, and you're like, oh, I love that kid. Just talk a little bit about Jack. I know that's a kid that Notre Dame is very high on right now. Just some of the other 2028 kids that you've been able to get out and see that are names that people need to know, because 27. It's a unique class based on looking back, but I don't know that it's going to end up being a unique class as much looking forward, because of what seems to be coming down the pike in Chicago in 28 and 29.
Yeah, you talk about Jack McNamara. He's one of those. This is where, you come up with a gem. The first game I'm watching them play Valparaiso, Indiana. And of course, I'm there for Braden Parks. And that was the first night. I think I called you afterwards or like text you during the game. And I was like, whoa, they got this other youngster on the defensive end that's like, yo, he's crazy. And then all of a sudden, and they're blowing him out. They're like, it's like 41-3. And I'm standing there in the third quarter, and all of a sudden they throw this crossing pass to a tight end. And he breaks 2 or 3 tackles and then jukes another guy, and he gets up the sideline. And I'm like, yo, who is this kid? It's like, this kid's like 6'4", 225 pounds. And I find out it's Jack McNamara. And I'm like, okay, like that's his first target of the game, but he definitely made use of it because you saw everything you want to see from a kid. Athletic, great hands, moves well, runs well as a tight end. He doesn't lumber as a tight end. He's very smooth and athletic. And he's just your typical Southside Irish kid, man. He just hard-nosed. All game, he just blocked. And then when he got his opportunity to catch the ball, you saw how athletic he can be. And so he's a fast riser right now. The offers are rolling in for this kid. People are starting to catch on to who he is in their offense. He's, like I said, primarily he's a blocker. So that lets you know he can be an inline blocker. He's athletic enough that if you want to move him outside to the slot or move him outside to the field, he can be a very, very capable pass receiver as well. And so the sky's the limit for this kid. He really has great upside. He really does.
He's the kid that I hope Notre Dame goes after. And honestly, how you got a kid named from Chicago, goes to a Catholic school in Chicago, whose name is Jack McNamara. If that kid doesn't end up at Notre Dame, then I'm going to quit covering recruiting like altogether. Like it's got to happen. There's some 2028 defensive linemen from Chicago that are not just talented players, Shaun, but elite players as well.
Potential for 3 5-star defensive linemen to come out of the 2028 class, for all of them to be eventually at Notre Dame. You talk about Caleb Tucker, a kid I'm going to watch tonight. He plays the nose for Mark Carmel. This kid is, already tilting 345 pounds, but doesn't move like it.
Boy was
Like
born to be a nose tackle, Sean. He was born to
man,
be a nose tackle.
dude, and he plays it well. But you're talking about someone that you see him and you say, okay, he's just going to be a run stuffer, and then all of a sudden you see him get after the quarterback and move the pocket and destroy the pocket, and you're like, oh man, and he's just a babe. Like he's a babe. Then you talk about Cameron McGee. I went to see Braden Parks, and all I could talk about after the first game was Cameron McGee. I'm like, yo,
The whole game, Sean's texting me about Cameron McGee. He's like, there's this 28 kid. Never told me his name until after the show, but you're like, yo, there's this 28 kid. And I'm like, okay, all right, cool. And of course, we reach out and you know, Sean talks to me. I reach out to people that I know and you know, and you find out like, okay, Notre Dame's on these guys. That's something that's very different. I want you to get back to Cameron McGee in a second because he's a dude. But that's something that's been very different is in the past when I would reach out to people at Notre Dame about Chicago kids, it'd be like, yeah, you know, and you get some reason why they're slow playing the kid, or they didn't know about the kid, or like, yeah, we talked to him at this one point in time, but, you know, and they give you this reason why they're not on him. Yeah. And every time I'm like, oh, yeah. And then they start talking, and not even just like, oh, yeah, we know about him, but like, I reached to somebody the other day about Caleb, like, oh, yeah, we love that. We love him. We want to get him here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, then, you know, that like you could tell that there's a relationship already that's been building. There's knowledge there that's already been building. And so that's one thing that's been different too, Sean, is when I reach out to people at Notre Dame about certain kids, it's like, oh yeah, we've had him on, we're going to have him on next weekend, or he's going to be here. We're here with them. And so that's what makes it known to us. I think if there's yet in this year that you've told me about a kid that I haven't reached out to sources in there and Notre Dame didn't already know about him. And that's never happened before, ever. Well, in conversation between you and I.
And that's good to know. And it's all about building a relationship in Chicago. You're seeing this renaissance, and we'll get to why the renaissance is happening as far as high school football. But the coaches are vitally important in building a relationship with the coaches. I think whether quietly or whether or not people report it, Notre Dame in the offseason has done a good job getting around to certain schools. I went to Marist. That was a big-time offensive tackle at Marist High School up here that Notre Dame was talking to over the summer, Rico Schreiber. And eventually he ended up committing to Purdue. But they were talking. They checked in on him. They went up to the school. And I went to the game. Had him on campus. I talked to his dad. Yeah. I talked to his dad a couple of weeks ago, and just, you know, he was like, man, thank you for talking. He was like, oh, yeah, I remember you. Thank you for checking in on my kid and talking about him. So that relationship is being built with the coaches, the programs, when staffers can tell you, like, yeah, Notre Dame was just here. Like, they're giving us the feeling that they're going to do whatever they can to get this kid. They're very interested in that kid. That lets you know that Notre Dame is doing their due diligence. They're doing everything they're supposed to do with a city with that much talent in close proximity. That's how you go after that city. That's how you go after that talent. And now in the 2007 class, right? Just in the 2027 class, Notre Dame has already been in contact and built a relationship with 9 of the top 10 players in the state. Not just the city, the state of Illinois. 9 of 10. The top 3 players, all defensive line in the 28 class, Caleb Tucker, Cameron McGee, Darian Prescott, all Chicago area kids. They're literally the top 3 players in the 28 class in the state of Illinois on the defensive line. They all already have relationships with Illinois and have either visited, I mean, not with Illinois, Notre Dame have visited or will be visiting. So, look, the Notre Dame flag is flying higher than ever in the city of Chicago. Just this game tonight, Notre Dame has either recruited, targeted, gotten visits from, or will be getting visits from 13 kids in this game tonight between Chicago Mark Carmel and Chicago Brother Rice. 13. On both defensive lines, Notre Dame has gone after 3 of the defensive linemen for both teams at some point and built relationships. So that's enough said right there. And the emphasis seems to be in the trenches on the O-line and the defensive line, which is great. You know, it's absolutely fantastic.
Shaun, do you have any theories as to why we're seeing a resurgence in the area of Chicago when it comes to football talent? Do you have any thoughts as to why? Do you think the talent's always been there, but now parents are sending kids to the right schools? Or, I mean, is it better coaching at the younger ages, at the older? Like, what is, because you've told me for a while that you think they're like, I'll tell you this, like, I'm from Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Virginia area. And I'll tell you right now, some of the best athletes we would hear about when we were in high school didn't play high school sports. They didn't go to school. They dropped out. They were, they were doing their thing. I mean, and it just or they were just kids whose parents didn't let them play football growing up. I mean, there's just all these different reasons why they went to some high school that didn't have money and that didn't have, maybe it kind of took them under their wing. There's all these different reasons why these kids didn't play football, but you'd see them on the street, and like you'd go to the hoop it up contest and you're like, who the heck's that guy? Like, oh yeah, that's so and so. Like, well, where'd he play college ball? Like, bro, he didn't even play high school basketball or football, And maybe, I don't know. There's lots of different reasons why, but why do you think we're seeing this kind of resurgence in the city of Chicago? And it's, as you said, it's skill positions, it's the line positions, but we're seeing more and more not only D1 players, but more so the high level D1 players. I don't even know if we're seeing more D1 players. It maybe, I don't know if it's that, but it's definitely more of the high level players.
Yeah, just opportunity. I think it started with the root programs that are being established. You have a lot of former high school football stars that are coming back to their various neighborhoods and starting root football programs and really building them up. And now they're becoming feeders into majority the Catholic schools and a few of the public schools that have really good programs. That's number one. And Carnell Tate is part of that. I remember meeting Carnell Tate for the first time when he was a seventh grader, coming from the Cougars program on the west side of Chicago. And his mom, because there wasn't really opportunity on the west side of Chicago, his mom sends him to Marist High School on the south side of Chicago. And then eventually he goes on to IMG, after he gains traction in recruiting rankings in 7-on-7. So more opportunity has really been provided for a lot of talented kids. The talent was just a little dormant because it lacked opportunity and lacked resources. And now that you have a lot of former football players that have either played college or the NFL and can attract resources and bring in people to help them in various parts of the city, that's really started to kind of capitalize and mine the talent that's always been there. And so now you're actually I'm starting to see a lot of parents far more involved, right? Because it was always easier in Chicago to just put your kid into basketball. Football is a little bit more different, requires a little bit more time, just going back and forth to practice. Like, your kid can go to the park and shoot hoops, right? It's hard. Back in the day, we used to get together at the park as a neighborhood and play games, but that really doesn't exist anymore, especially with video games and everything. It's hard to get kids to even go outside. So unless you have some organized programs for these kids really to latch on to, and they're popping up all over the place in Chicago, you're going to miss out on mining some of the talent that's there. Like a kid like Cameron McGee, who grew up playing basketball, and then look, I went to his game last week. I don't even know if I told you this story. Maybe I did. I go to the game last week.
No, I was traveling last week, so we didn't get a chance to talk much.
We didn't get a chance to talk. They're blowing. I forgot who they were playing. They're blowing this team out. They're
you did tell me this.
They're 42-0, right? And so I talked to him about this. I'm like, I'm looking on the sideline. I'm like, you got Brother Rice. I mean, you got Mount Carmel next week. The second team defense is in. You're back on the field with your offense. Why is Cameron McGee lining up at wide receiver? I'm like, why are you all even chancing this? Mm-hmm. And the first two plays are run for him in the slot. He's a slot receiver. This kid is 6'4", 235 pounds, and runs like a deer. He took off, and I'm like, first two plays, he runs like a hitch, and then they move him out to the field, and he runs like a quick curl and like gets up the field for like 10 to 12 yards. So I asked him, I said, dude, what did you say to talk yourself into that? He was like, yeah, I had to
Mm.
talk the coaches into it because they definitely were like, man, no. He's like, but I talked. He said, dude, there is no way for defenders to play over the summer. So he said, I played wide
Yeah.
receiver. So I go
Yeah.
play 7-on-7 over the summer just to stay in shape. I play wide receiver, and then when I come back, I go to the defensive side of the ball. So man, I just wanted to get some reps in. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yo, you looked incredible. He said, man, it's a natural position for me. This is
Every
the type of
D-line coach in
legacy.
America is like, don't ever do that again, because you're going to have offensive coaches being like, hey, like, hold on a second. You
Yeah.
might be able to play a little flex tight end for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
If
And I
I'm out
told him, I
Washington
said,
with Larry Johnson, I'm like, hey, man, don't do that no more.
don't
I know
ever
what
do
you're
that
doing.
again.
Like, don't do
And I
that no more.
told him, I said, I don't think you're going to get that chance next week. He was like, no. That's why I asked him beg to get in this week, because I knew this is like the perfect chance for me to get in, and play wide receiver. But look, that's really what's taking place. Opportunity, resources, and interest from players wanting to give back. Wanting to give back to the community that served them and got them to the success that they've had, whether it's on the college level, the NFL level, and then thankfully finding some sponsors and businesses that are interested in pouring into their communities and the young people in the community. That's really where it's come from, grassroots. And now you're starting to see the fruits of it, because it really started back when, like I said, with Cardell Tate, when he was in 7th grade. That was like the beginning of it. And he's one of the first fruits, I would say, of the Renaissance all across the city in different neighborhoods where football is really kind of catching up to basketball in a sense in Chicago. Like, it's closing the gap.
Well, we're going to find out here, Shaun, over the next few months if Notre Dame is able to, actually next 6 to 8 months, if Notre Dame's able to make that big splash in the 27 class in Chicago like they need to. Honestly, if I had my way, I'd get all 4 of those kids in the 27 class. I would, if I'm Notre Dame, I'd try to get all 4 of them. I think that would be huge. The more of them you can get, the better. And then also that's where the pipeline kind of really starts, is when you start adding more of these kids on an annual basis. Like the current freshman class has a lot of Chicago kids in it. That's a good start. Like, you got Chris Burgess, you got Joe Reeve, you've got Dom Hulak. I mean, there's plenty of Chicago kids that are coming in if you're able to have the same level of success in 2027. So 26 doesn't have. Am I drawing a blank here? I don't know. There's nobody in 26 from Chicago in the 26 class, unless I'm drawing a complete blank.
No. Mikhail Blade was somebody they went after
Yeah,
early
right.
for the 26
And
class.
then kind of backed off him a little bit
Oh,
for no reasons.
they were talking to Gabe Hill for a little bit.
Yeah, King Liggins, but they ended
King
up just
Liggins,
there were better players on the board, I
in the
think, than those guys.
27 class.
And they would have
Yeah.
gladly taken Mikhail Blade if he was willing to commit earlier. He just
Mm-hmm.
by the time he was ready to commit, they were already, they'd kind of already filled up at those spots. But
I think Notre Dame is in a position where, like I said, there are kids that I go watch and I say to myself, this kid can play at Notre Dame, but they just have better players on the board.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's a very good position to be in.
That's what I don't think is necessarily true in 2027. And that's what makes that class unique, that there are other players on the same level as Braden Parks and Quentin Burrell especially, but there's not a lot of guys or any that are ahead of him. And I would throw Tavares Harrington into that conversation and Cameron Wagner into that conversation as well. So I think you got to get at least 2 to 3 of those 4. And then, of course, that's where the pipeline starts. So these kids visit campus and they get to meet Chris Burgess and Joe Reeve and Dom Hulak and hopefully Quentin Burrell and Braden Parks and Tavares Harrington and Cam Wagner, guys like that. And I think that's where you're going to be able to start seeing just this is what you do. If you're a big time player, you go to Notre Dame. And it won't always be 100% true, but that's a place where you need to be. And I think the staff is working on that. So going to be very interesting to see how it goes, Shaun. So that's it for today's recruiting show, folks. We really appreciate y'all being here with us for this. We got a lot more we're going to discuss here. We're going to get into some Notre Dame offense. We're going to talk a little college football. But, of course, folks, do us a favor. You see that little thumbs up button below you. Go ahead and hit that for us. That really helps us out. We greatly appreciate that. If you're listening via podcast platform, we would also greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we're doing at Irish Breakdown is to sign up at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Shaun, it's funny looking at this Notre Dame football team, and it's funny, and I don't even mean funny in like a ha-ha way. Funny is more of an ironic way, even somewhat a disappointing way, but just more of like a, well, didn't call this one right. When you're coming into the season, the one thing that I was certain of was two things I was certain of. One, I was certain that the Notre Dame defense was going to still be really, really good. And I was certain that eventually the Notre Dame offense is going to be really, really good. But it hasn't necessarily played out that way in either side because it took one game for the Notre Dame offense to figure things out with a new quarterback and new players. The defense has been disappointing. But, Shaun, we've seen a Notre Dame offense in 4 games, despite playing 4 straight Power 4 teams. We've seen a Notre Dame offense that has quickly emerged as one of the best in the nation, Shaun, and that's what we're going to spend our time really talking about here in this next part of the show, with the premise being, okay, this is all great, but the question is, with the defense playing the way it is and the gap between it playing championship caliber football and where it is now is enormous. But you could argue that Notre Dame last year at this point in time, the gap between where they were offensively and where they needed to be to play championship caliber football was also enormous. So the defensive thing, we're going to kind of hold off on talking about that until after the Boise game. I want to see 2 games in a row of this defense showing growth. Then we can talk about, okay, can they become a defense capable of helping this team win a championship? But today we're going to talk about the offense, and the conversation is going to center around, number one, is this elite an elite offense? And not so that we can hold our hands up and say, Notre Dame's elite on offense, but more so, if it is, then does that mean it's good enough to lead this team to another deep playoff run? Now, you can't win a championship with your defense playing the way it is now. It's going to have to get better. But the better your offense is, the more elite your offense is, the further the defense has to go to be a complement to the offense. And that's really the premise of today's show, Shaun, is talking about if it's elite or not. And then number two, what makes it elite? And then number 3 is, okay, but is it good enough, or can it be good enough to when we get to November, December, January, is it good enough to say when they have to then eventually play the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Bamas, the Oregons, the teams like that, is it good enough to then do for this team what the defense did last year? And so to begin this conversation, Shaun, let's just talk a little numbers. Going into this game against Boise State, despite playing against, as I mentioned, 4 Power 4 football teams, Notre Dame ranks 11th nationally in points per game, 44. Notre Dame ranks 16th nationally in yards per game at 16th, or at 479.8. They're 13th in college football in yards per play at 7.3, which, by the way, if it stays at 7.3, would set a new Notre Dame record. The previous record of 7 yards a play was set by Mike Denbrock in the 2015 Notre Dame offense. Just gives you a little context. They are 12th in the country in college in red zone touchdown percentage. They are 19th in college football in third down offense. And so then you look at some of the pass game stuff. They're 16th in the country in yards per game, but they're 5th in yards per attempt at 10.8. They are 6th in the country at yards per completion at 15.3. And they're 8th in college football in quarterback rating at 183.05. When you look at some other, just let's dive into some more things real quick, Shaun. So when you look at Notre Dame's offense, and you look at, okay, they're at 44 points a game. They've only played Power 4 teams. So you go to cfbstats.com if you guys want to know where we find this stuff. And when you go to scoring offense in the rankings, you can type in there in wins and losses, non-conference, conference, unranked, ranked, all this. Just look at games against where the opponent was a Power 4 team. Notre Dame ranks 2nd in college football in points per game. The only team ahead of them, ironically, is North Texas, because North Texas scored 59 points in a win over Washington State, who this CFB stat still counts as a Power 4 team. I don't, for obvious reasons. But Notre Dame is number 1 and at 44 points a game. Oregon is number 2 at 43.5. And Oregon is also a team that has played 4 Power 4 opponents so far. And so Notre Dame is obviously playing at a very high level offensively. And it's not like, hey, they've got that 60-point outburst against that G5 team or that FCS team to to kind of stack the rankings a little bit, we mentioned earlier also that Notre Dame is 11th in college football 16th in yards per game and 11th in yards per play. But if you look at it again against Power 5 teams, Notre Dame moves up to 10th in yards per game, and one of the teams ahead of them, Arkansas, has only played one game against a Power 5 team because CFB Stats doesn't consider Notre Dame a Power 5 team, so it doesn't take their numbers way down. Notre Dame would be ahead of them, obviously, if they did. Then you look at yards per play and where Notre Dame ranks there. They're 4th in yards per play. Again, Arkansas is ahead of them. If they counted the Notre Dame game against Arkansas, that would drop them down a bit as well. Old Dominion is actually number 1. They've played 2 games against P4 teams. Oregon there is right there behind them. So when you look at the numbers, Shaun, Notre Dame is not just performing well in these categories. They're performing at an elite level. They are 5th in college football in quarterback rating against Power 4 opponents. UNLV and North Texas are 2 teams ahead of them. And you know, those are the only 2 teams ahead. Those are 2. They've only played 1 game. If you look at yards per attempt, Notre Dame is 3rd in college football in games against Power 4 teams. Washington and Indiana right ahead of them. Indiana's 0.1 ahead of them right now. So no matter how you look at it, Shaun, Notre Dame's quarterbacks this year, Notre Dame's pass game has produced at an elite level. And you could argue, and I think rightfully so, that they've already played the 2 best pass defenses they're going to face this year in Miami and Arkansas, and the 2 best defenses in general that they're going to play this year. And it's not, but here's the difference though, Shaun. It's not just the pass game. You want to know why? Because Notre Dame threw the ball really well against Texas A&M. Do you want to know why Notre Dame in the last 2 weeks has looked so good? It's not just because they're throwing for a bunch of yards, because they threw for a bunch of yards against Texas A&M. It's that they're not only throwing it, but they're running it. Against Purdue, Notre Dame passed for 281, rushed for 254. Against Arkansas, they passed for 431 yards and rushed for 210. That's the kind of thing we just honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen that from Notre Dame. I'm going to have to go back and look. I'm sure like maybe against like a New Mexico or a Bowling Green or something that we've seen Notre Dame do something like that. But I honestly don't remember a Notre Dame team throwing for over 400 yards. Yeah, actually against New Mexico, they passed for 434 yards, but they only rushed for 157. And they threw for 340 against Bowling Green, but only rushed for 223. So I don't remember a performance where Notre Dame passed for 400 yards and rushed for 200. Closest that they've came that I can find is Syracuse in 2016, where they passed for 471 and rushed for 183. That's the closest we've seen. So what they did against Arkansas, people can talk all they want about Arkansas is not very good. That's fine. But when you're doing things that just rarely happen from anybody, especially your program, you're playing at a high level. So, and then of course the efficiency numbers, ESPN's efficiency rankings, they have the Notre Dame offense ranked 4th in college football behind Vanderbilt, Oregon, and USC. The FEI efficiency rankings have Notre Dame 5th behind Oregon, USC, Ohio State, and Alabama. So this has been so far this year, Shaun, the numbers show that on the whole, they've played like an elite unit, even though I would argue they certainly didn't do that in the opener against Miami. But let's talk about it, Shaun. Number one, is this Notre Dame offense elite? Is this considered, what does elite mean? It is one of the best units in college football and is a unit in which you feel like they have a shot to perform at a high level regardless of the opponent.
I'll be honest. I'm going to say no right now because I want to see them be able to do it against an elite defensive line. Because I think the only thing that's holding them back from being an elite offense is the offensive line's performance when they go up against elite defensive lines. And not having to dominate that defensive line, but being able to just back your own and hold your own. That's it. That's all you have to do with the talent you have at running back, talent you have at quarterback, and the talent you now have on the outside and at tight end. So that for me keeps me from saying just right out yes. It's not a potential standpoint, right? And it's definitely not. We know the potential at quarterback. We know the potential in the passing game. This is something we talked about because I saw someone in the chat saying I agree. You know, last year you can question some of the play calling and some of the game planning. And you even now taking a look, I think I mentioned it last week. Now I understand a little more of the game plan against Miami. right? Because if it was about, it should have been about the running backs and playing off of that from game one. But I really believe they were saying this is us developing this young quarterback for us
I also
and
think they
making
didn't
sure.
have a lot of faith in their offensive line in that matchup.
And that problem, once again, that goes to why I say not yet. This offensive line has to get to the point where, okay, now we can call this full offensive unit elite, especially going up against, that's when you prove you're elite. When you go up against big time defenses in the playoffs and you still can put up 30, 40 points. That's when you say to yourself, okay, this is an elite offense. They're right there. I think they're going to continue to push towards that. Going back to the numbers you read, second in the nation in points per game at home against Power 5 competition. Well, they don't have a Power 5 team coming in, but that doesn't bode well for Boise State coming in, that they're averaging 44 points at home. And so,
they're averaging 44 points on the season.
Yeah.
They're actually averaging more than that at home because they've scored 56 and 40 points at home. So they're actually averaging 48 points a game at home. And
yeah, 48. You're right.
Yeah.
48 points at home. So
as a team.
Okay, I'm sorry. You just made it worse for Boise State. I was trying to give them some.
You could say, Shaun, that if you just look at offensive points, they're at 41 at home. 41 at home because they had the
special teams touchdown,
2 special team scores and one in each of those games.
Right.
But so, as I pointed out with Trev yesterday, I think in both of those games we can agree that if the special teams doesn't return, those plays, that the way the offense is playing in games, they're probably still scoring.
Probably going to score
in both of those games, especially Purdue game. Yeah.
So for me, I'm so interested because now my mind starts to go down the road, right? Because I saw this coming. You and I, we had conversations last year about, man, wait until next year. This passing offense, like everybody else wanted to see it, right? And I'm like,
well, you and I also had a glimpse late in the year that Malachi Fields is going to be a potential, player,
addition and play, yeah. So with that being said, I think going back to what I was talking about with the playbook, and that's the connection I was trying to make. It's like, man, we knew that there were certain things that Mike Denbrock would have loved to get to last year that he couldn't. He had to simplify things, right?
Yeah. Well, and steered in a different direction.
Yes.
Like Mike Denbrock did this thing, and it's sadly not as prominent as you'd think. And I wish the current defensive coordinator would take notes. But Mike Denbrock called the offense last year after the first, and this is where I want to say, I'm not even throwing shade at Chris Ash right now. I'm legitimately saying take notes because Mike Denbrock tried to run an offense early in the season based on kind of what he thought his team was going to be.
Yeah.
That it turned out not to be. And then he shifted course in games 5 and 6. He started to shift course. So hopefully Chris Ash will do that. I'm not even throwing shade at him right now. The difference is Denbrock didn't really have his offense in the spring because he didn't have Riley Leonard. And so he's think about who he had in the spring. Had Steve Angeli, CJ Carr, and Kenny Minchie. So yeah, he went into the season thinking we're going to be able to throw the ball a little bit more than you know what I mean? And then obviously Riley was good at certain things and not good at other things. And Denbrock started to lean into the talent he had. Denbrock did what every good coach should do. Coach what you have, recruit what you want. And that's what he's done. And so what they do this offseason, they went out and recruited what they wanted in certain ways. That's what good coaches do, Shaun. But to your point, we knew that this is where Denbrock wanted to go with the offense. And one of the biggest misconceptions that I believe people have is that Denbrock needs, a dual threat quarterback in the offense. I don't think he needs that. I think every coach wants that. Every coach wants a guy that can throw like Joe Burrow and run like Brandon Wimbush. I mean, everybody wants that. There's only been one team in the last 10 years that's had that, and that was Louisville. So like those guys maybe two. You could throw Kyler Murray into that conversation as well. Kyler was pretty legit at both in 2018. But those guys don't come along very often, Shaun. And when they do, they're first-round draft picks. And so what he has always needed is a guy that can throw the football. What he's always wanted truly is a guy that can throw the football first. We knew that. You and I knew that. And now he has that, and we're starting to see it come together. let's talk about Shaun, so here's my opinion, Shaun. I think Notre Dame right now is playing like an elite offense. Right now, there's no doubt. The question is, can it play like an elite offense, to your point, against a team that has a legitimately good defensive line? I'm actually not even concerned about a team with a good secondary, because we saw that against Texas A&M. They have a pretty darn good secondary, and they couldn't cover the Notre Dame guys. And so I'm not actually worried about that. I'm not worried about the quarterback as much. He's going to have his redshirt freshman mistakes, and there's still plenty of room for him to improve. We'll talk about that. The offensive line has played really well the last two games. And I would argue against Purdue or against Arkansas in the run game, that was against a pretty good defensive line defending the run, but also a very undisciplined defense, as we saw. So I still think to say that it is an elite offense, I do think that you are correct, Shaun, that we need to see it against a better D line. The concern is we're not going to really see that probably till the postseason. Maybe USC.
And see, this connects to last year, because what you're talking about is you don't have to be affirmed in order to be.
Right.
It had not been affirmed yet, based upon the schedule and the loss in Northern Illinois, whether or not Notre Dame could really beat a good team.
Right.
They hadn't shown it. Oh, they gave up 35 to USC. Everybody was talking going into the playoffs. Oh, Indiana has a chance. They were already an elite team, right, and a team that could be a championship team. They didn't have the chance to affirm it.
Right.
So this offense can be elite. They don't have to wait to face a playoff team that would just confirm it.
Right.
They can become it before they get to the playoffs, because the process of becoming is not based upon your opponent. It's your self-work.
Right. And it's not based on affirmation. It's based on what you are. Absolutely. You don't have to tell me that I am something for me to be that something. If I am that something. Saying you're something doesn't mean you are something just because you say you are. You have to show it to some degree. Yeah. And you have to have those characteristics. And so that's what I'm saying. Like right now, they're playing at an elite level. Their offensive line's playing at a high level. Their quarterback is absolutely dealing. They have the best backfield in college football, and their pass catchers are legit. Yeah. And they're at all levels. Their game planning the last 2 weeks, I think Mike Denbrock has just been an absolute maestro the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's been very good. I think his pass game stuff against A&M was very good. I didn't love the run game design against A&M, but we saw them make changes, immediate adjustments after that.
Yeah.
There's always going to be that lingering question of, can this offensive line play at a high level against a top team? But the reality is I don't know that there's going to be a lot of regular season opponents that can prove that. So that's going to be a little bit of a wait and see. But now, go ahead, Shaun.
Don't you think this week? See, this is when you have things like this, is certain things that certain challenges that an opponent can provide. It's not that they're talented enough to beat you or overwhelm you, but it's certain things that they do well that's like, okay, this is something we actually need to get better at, right? Just hearing Jawan Sider talk about, we know they're going to light us up this week. That's what they did when I faced them against Penn State.
Even before then, right? I mean, that's who they are. You watch film, that's who they are.
That's who they are.
Stupid. They're going to have watch Purdue and Arkansas basically sit back and get annihilated.
Right.
To the tune of 1,200 yards the last 2 weeks. They're not stupid. I think there's three teams, Shaun, in my opinion, that can present a challenge that will be somewhat of a gauge for the development of the offensive line. And I do think this weekend's game against Boise State is one of those. Because what I know about this offensive line is it was terrible against Miami. But I don't think that's who they are. And that's who they were that night. But I watched Emil Wagner, who I've now seen play 20 football games, and he hasn't been great this year by any stretch. But he was especially bad that night. I see things like the performance of Anthony Knapp in that game. And you're like, okay, that's a bit of a concern because that's a continual problem. But when I look at Emil Wagner, it's like, that doesn't look like the normal Emil. You had Billy Schrouth had some inconsistency. Well, yeah, you kind of expect that because it's his first game back. Gerby Lambert was very up and down. Yeah, you kind of expect that he's making his first career start. The fact that he's performed better and better in each week, and the fact that that Ashton has gotten better. I think Billy Schrouth, to me, had one of the best games of his career. The last 2 weeks is one of the best 2-game stretches of his career. Like, he's playing at a very high level. Anthony Knapp is still a major question mark in pass pro, Shaun, but his run blocking is like big time. Even against Miami, he had some very good run blocks. Like, that's the one thing he can do. But can this line play like that? Well, that's going to be a bit of a wait and see. But I think when you go against a team that has a guy like Jaden Virgin Morgan, and who had 15+ tackles for loss last year, 10+ sacks last year, when you go against a guy like Braxton Feely, who had a lot of Power 4 teams just begging him to come play for them in the portal this year, you look at them and you say, okay, this is a test, to your point, that how the interior guys perform against Braxton Feely. And Hallam and Trev talked about this in his he's got this feature he does, which it's like a 3-2-1 type of thing, 3 storylines, like 2 matchups, and then one takeaway on it, and it's he talks about that Jaden Virgin Morgan matchup between Knapp and Wagner, and he hasn't been playing lights out this week, but he is coming off his best game against App State. He started to look like the guy from last year. So how can they hold up against him? And it doesn't tell us, like, okay, bring on Ruben Bain, but if they can thrive against those 2 matchups, it definitely says, okay, we've at least put that bad of a performance in the rear view. I think Boise's one of those matchups. I think USC is one of those matchups because their defense isn't great, but their D-line will attack, and they're athletic, and they're deep, and they've got some guys with talent. And then the final one is Pitt. And Pitt's defense has got issues, but the one thing that they're going to do is attack Notre Dame. Those are the things that I'm concerned about. I'm actually still concerned about how well this line is going to handle an aggressive defense, more so than can they handle an elite D-line. Because, yes, I watched Emil Wagner struggle mightily against Ruben Bain, but I also watched Emil Wagner hold his own against Jalen Walker and Michael Williams in the playoffs last year. I watched Emil, for the most part, hold his own against Abdul Carter last year. Lost some battles, held his own in some others against him, and denied Dennis Sutton. So, I'm not as concerned about that performance. I'm more concerned about whether or not this offensive line can handle the pressures, the line games that have really plagued them since Joe Rudolph's been here. And that's more of a bigger concern. So and that's what I'm kind of go back to the beginning. If you'd have told me before the season that 4 games in, my 2 biggest question marks are going to be the defensive line and the defense and the offensive line, I might have told you were nuts. Because those are the 2 things we thought were going to be the biggest certainties on this team. Having said that, Shaun, if the offensive line's improvements the last 2 weeks are going to be all around, meaning they can replicate that against no matter what you see, and I'm not saying they can't. I'm just saying we need to now see that. That's the next hurdle for them, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying they can't do it. They won't do it. I'm saying, okay, line up, big boys. That's what I think Arkansas provided to them. Is, okay, can you go against a big physical defensive line and hold your own? And they did not only hold their own, they won that matchup convincingly. I mean, I had Anthony Knapp, I think I had him like 3-4 knockdowns in that game. I had Eli Raridan had a knockdown in that game. Gerby had 2 knockdowns in that game. Billy Schrouth had a couple. I'm not talking like hit a guy who's not looking at you. I mean, taking a guy and driving him down and putting him on the ground against that big defensive line. That was like, okay, that's a step. Now the next step is, can you handle the pressure packages? And I think that's what makes this weekend so important. If they can handle that, Shaun, and it's not even about the talent, it's can they mentally execute the proper way in those situations. I think that's the next step that the offensive line has to prove. And Boise, USC, and Pitt are probably the 3 best opponents that they will face that will do those things to them. They're going to tell us if they can figure those things out.
And another interesting thing that I think, I've always said that the offense goes as this offensive line goes in recent history. It was always like, immediately in a loss, people will immediately point to the offensive line. Why? Because it was everything, you didn't have the talented wide receiver, you didn't have that elite talented quarterback. The offensive line had to win, they had to dominate in order for you to have a good chance to win against elite teams, right? And we could talk about whether or not that's unfair. Now they're at a point where that we don't need you to dominate the win. All we just need you to do is play good.
Just get a body on a body.
Let's get a body on a body, right? And
That's
so
it.
that is, I think that provides a different atmosphere for this offensive line to kind of like grow into who they can become to assist that step to being elite. To whereas it's not on you to make us elite.
Right.
It's really your responsibility to make sure that we continue to grow and get better because we're already playing at an elite level. And if you come along and do your job now, regardless of who we face, we know we're going to get this outcome. That's a totally different pressure.
You're the key ingredient. You're not the only ingredient. Meaning you can be the final ingredient to make this thing work. We can't work without you, but we could also put you in there and it wouldn't matter. Like in the past, like they had to be there. They had to be the key ingredient. Now they just need to be an ingredient. You know what I mean? Like they don't need to be, I said it wrongly. They don't need to be the key ingredient. They're a key ingredient, not the key ingredient, meaning there's other parts that are playing at such a high level that we don't need you to go out there and necessarily be the Joe Moore award-winning team in your performance, in that you are the most dominant line in the country. You need to be the most sound offensive line in the country. You need to be a do-your-job offensive line. And then the talent can take over at that point in time, because there's no questioning the talent of this offensive line. The only question I have is I still don't know that everybody's in the right positions, and I still would like to see Gerby Lambert and Anthony Knapp switch. And I think if those two guys simply switched, that this offensive line would look very different. But even in the position he's in, Anthony Knapp is still an outstanding run blocker. And Gerby Lambert's getting better and better every week. So I have a lot of faith there. Now let's talk about what is making this offensive line play at an elite, this offense play at an elite level in recent weeks. And we'll get to one part last, the quarterback last. But I think the other part is I don't care who your quarterback is. If you have mediocre talent, you're not going to be an elite offense. You need legit talent. And there are some quarterbacks in college football right now that I think are very talented players that aren't performing at an elite level, because I don't think that what's around them is necessarily all that great. This, Shaun, in my opinion, is without a doubt the most talented skill offense that we've seen since 2015. And you can make a case that it's deeper than 2015. With all due respect to Malachi Fields and Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse and all the other receivers, none of them are Will Fuller. But I would argue 2, 3, 4, and 5 that there's arguably that they're better overall. And then when you throw the tight end in the mix, I think that the tight end position is stronger than it was in 2015, because you've got senior Eli Raridan against freshman Alizé Mack. So I think overall, I think this is the best group of pass catchers they've had since 2015. And this is the best running back duo they've had since 1992. And I don't think it's, with all due respect to some of the great running back combos that Notre Dame has had in the last 20 years, with all due respect, to even recently, Audric Estime and Logan Diggs, with all due respect to Josh Adams and CJ Prosise, who weren't really a duo. They never used them as a duo. It was CJ was the guy, and then he got hurt, and then Josh became the guy. It wasn't even really a duo. With all due respect to Jonas Gray and Sierra Wood, with all due respect to Theo Riddick and Sierra Wood, with all due respect to Armando Allen and Robert Hughes, or whatever duo you want to go point back to over the last 30 plus years, there's nobody as good as what we're seeing right now at this room. And the last time you'd have to a running back room that you could talk about being that good was Reggie Brooks and Jerome Bettis. Reggie finished in the top 5 in Heisman Trophy voting that year, and Jerome Bettis was a top 15 NFL draft pick. So like that's the last time we've seen that. And I think that's ultimately, and what makes it important is it's talent's one thing. We didn't see that talent take over in the opener. Didn't get a chance to take over in the opener. Mike Denbrock has said that'll never happen again under my watch. And what we've seen him do in the last 3 games is the entire game plan is built around the running backs, running the ball, and then and even the throwing game. I mean, even the first play of the game against Purdue. Well, what did that have to do with the running backs? Well, here's what it had to do with the running backs. You ran a play action pass that made the whole defense say, "Get to Jeremiah Love," and they're like, "Oh shoot, we forgot about Malachi Fields." But I think the running back room is I would actually argue is potentially even better than I thought it was going to be this season. I actually don't think as a duo they're running the ball as well as I thought they would. Jaredarian Price is, but Jeremiah Love's really only had one really strong game as a runner. That's it. That was Purdue. But as an all-around impact, when you look at what they're doing, so yeah, Jeremiah Love doesn't run the ball great against Arkansas, but what does he do? Catches 5 passes for 70 yards and a touchdown. You know, doesn't run the ball great against Arkansas. I mean, A&M, he rushes for 90-some yards, but needs 20-some carries to get there. But what does he also do? He catches a 36-yard wheel route with one hand for a touchdown. It's you just, when they're playing this way and they're being used this way, there's really no way to stop them. Because if you commit enough resources to stop the run part of it, then you don't have the resources to commit the pass game part of it, even to the backs. So I think Mike Denbrock's ability to use these backs the way that he has allowed them to be so productive, despite the fact everybody but Purdue's entire game plan was stop those 2 running backs. And only one team's been able to do it, and I don't even think it was about them. I think that was more a byproduct of the offensive line and some of the play calling. But since then, nobody's been able to keep these guys in check.
You know what? I love the construct that you laid out, that everything is built off the running game. And I think that was one of the mistakes. The running backs. Yes, I'm sorry. And I think that's the mistake they made against Miami. Just to point out, you want to know how good this offense is? No, Miami, I think, is like, depending upon what you look at from a statistical standpoint, they're either 2 or 3 in the nation defensively, right? I think it's between them and Oklahoma, best defensive lines in the nation right now. Notre Dame scored 24 points with a game plan that was questionable. The rest of their opponents on their schedule have scored a total of 22 points. That just shows you that even in a bad game, Notre Dame being able to score 24 points for the first-time starter at quarterback.
It's also their highest rushing yards they've allowed all year. It's the highest yards per play they've allowed all year by over half a yard.
Yeah.
That performance was. Just to your point, to point out how good that performance was even against them. It was the highest third down percentage they've allowed all season by almost 6 percentage points. Florida, for example, went 0 for 13 on third down. Yeah.
So you take away the turnovers, you might be adding another 10 points to that performance if they just didn't turn the ball over against Miami. So I think we know the construct of this offense bodes well because, like you said, it features the running backs. But we can talk about CJ Carr, but there's no one happier than CJ Carr about the addition of Malachi Fields. Having that dude on the outside to complement the run game, to be able to be a threat. And one of the most important things I think I heard Will Lee. He just faced Cam Coleman this week and basically just shut Cam Coleman down. And we know the passing offense at Auburn right now is just not as good with the quarterback play. But Will Lee was opening up to say, the guy facing at Notre Dame that's been the toughest matchup all year. Mm-hmm. And that's what he told the Texas A&M media. And so to watch them battle and to watch Malachi physically, be able to, win most of the matchups and be a go-to. To have that core
Yeah.
as a quarterback, you've played, right?
Yeah.
So I can only imagine what it would have been like for CJ to step on the field, not knowing I have a guy,
Yeah.
no matter the situation, I can go to. That has to be liberating and lift. Has to
100%.
lift the weight off of
100%.
him in his mind to know
Yeah.
I can have that guy. Which is why Geno, in the aftermath of the Texas A&M game, said, "Yo, I had to tell him you have to give him a chance. Like
Yeah.
don't overthink it. If you see him 1-on-1, just throw the ball up and give him a chance." And so to have that in a Notre Dame offense, which goes to we haven't had that probably since the Stovall, Samardzija era, where you felt like just throw it up to those guys and just give them a
I
chance.
would say 18 and 19 with Miles and Chase. I would say they were that way. Maybe not quite as good as Malachi, but I
Yeah,
mean, Ian clearly had faith in just throwing it up to those two
yeah,
guys.
that's a good
You think of
connection.
some of the
Yeah,
throws that even Brandon in 2017, I mean, you think about that back shoulder throw he made to Chase against Michigan State.
yeah,
So I would say
yeah,
Chase and Miles, although I think Malachi's better than they are. But to your point, Sean, that team went 22-2 in 2 seasons
yeah,
with those guys that, as one of those two guys is your lead receiver.
yeah, yeah.
And that's the whole point. I mean, look, this is why you brought Malachi Fields in. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why you brought him in, is to be that guy. And what's funny is I don't even think he's really gone off yet. Like, that's the scary thing. I don't think he's really gone off yet. I don't think he's even really playing at a way where I would say, oh yeah, this is the best we're going to see from Malachi Fields all year. I don't think that we are. I think what makes him so dangerous is he's a player that has shown I can beat you deep and like run by you, which he did
Yeah,
to Purdue and Arkansas. CJ just missed him against Arkansas, but he had that cornerback smoked against Arkansas. He had that little he leaned him out, guy overbit, he
mm-hmm.
jumps inside of him, then gets back out, stacks him, and a good ball from just a normal good ball from CJ, and that's a touchdown. He just missed him. It's going to happen. But he also showed that even when you're, to your point, even when I'm covered, I'm not really covered if you give me a shot. If you give me a chance, I'm gonna win those types of throws. And so I think those are things where when you talk about a young quarterback, Sean, I think that's 100% a great point. I mean, you could talk to Malik about this. How did you feel when you just knew if you got in trouble, just launch it downfield to number 7? You know what I mean? Go back and ask Gev. What was it like for you knowing you had 80 out there that you could just, in a pinch, throw it up to Tyler Eifert? You know, I mean, and Jimmy Clausen was an elite quarterback in 09 especially, but it doesn't hurt when you've got Golden Tate and Will Fuller, and Michael Floyd to throw the ball up to. That's the whole point. You need those players. Joe Burrow had one of the greatest seasons I've ever seen from a quarterback ever, maybe the greatest. But he doesn't do that if he doesn't have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, nor do they produce like they had if they didn't have Joe Burrow. And that's kind of the point of this, Sean, is you need to have the weapons to turn your quarterback loose. And then also you need the quarterback to turn your receivers loose. And one thing that you and I have talked a lot about is that this team has not, in my opinion, has not always had both of those at the same time. And if they can continue to perform at this level and even better, and that's the thing I keep telling people, this team can get better. And Malachi Fields is part of that because, and it's not that Malachi's not playing well. I don't know that they've necessarily fully gotten to the point where they know all the different ways to use him in the offense. And that's even harder when you also have Eli Raridan, Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, a healthy Jordan Faison, who we didn't see last year. Jordan got hurt in the first game of the year, and he was never really healthy. Hopefully, Jaden Greathouse won't play in this game, but hopefully they can get Jaden Greathouse going and add that to the mix. And that's why I keep saying is like, if they can figure out how to utilize Jaden Greathouse properly in this offense, that's when I get to the point where, like, I don't know how you stop this football team. But then you add the tight end into the mix. So, Sean, there was a lot of ifs with this offense going into the season. And it was, well, if Malachi Fields is what we think he could be, if Eli Raridan is able to be what we think he can be, if the running backs get used more effectively, Well, those ifs have turned into realities. And that's what we're seeing from this team now, Shaun. And that's what makes it so dangerous, because you can't – what does it mean to be an elite offense? And in my opinion, it also means down you can perform at a high level against anybody because you can perform at a high level in any way. So if a team's going to come in, like any good defense can take away what you do best. If Notre Dame gets to the playoffs and Georgia says, hey, we're not going to let Notre Dame throw on us, they can pretty much keep Notre Dame from throwing on them if they want to. But can you do that and then stop Notre Dame from running the football? Purdue said, hey, we're not going to let you throw the ball on us all over. Now, they ended up – Purdue stinks, so that what didn't work. So what did Notre Dame do? Okay, CJ's going to throw 4 passes in the first half, and we're going to put up, 35 points. It's if you try to take one thing away, you find yourself incredibly vulnerable to the other thing. And that, to me, ultimately, Shaun, is what makes this offense so elite. So then the question we have to ask ourselves, is the offense playing at a level, or can it play at a level, or if they do make the playoff, which I think if they win out, they will, is it good enough to then lead them on into a deep run? That's question number one, Shaun. Right now, with everything that we know, not if the defense this, if the defense that, just with who they are today, of what we know today, are they an offense that can be that? If not, why? And can they be that kind of offense?
I think game 1 is a litmus test based upon the information that we have, that Notre Dame, if they play a cleaner game, can get upwards to 30 points against a really good defense and an elite team. I think we've seen that, right? We don't expect Malachi Fields to fumble the ball like that. We don't expect at that point in the season CJ to make that mistake that he made in the third quarter when Notre Dame had a chance to go ahead and seize momentum and continue the momentum that they were gaining. So those are things that as this team gets better and this offense gets better, those mistakes should dissipate. And if they play the clean game, the offensive line plays better than they showed against Miami, yes, the potential is there. We don't even have to look at the other games. We can go back and literally look at their worst offensive performance and say, if these things improve, and we have seen proof against lesser talent, against lesser teams, that those things are improving, by the time they get an opportunity to face, whether it's Oregon, Ohio State, Miami again, or one of the other top teams like Alabama or Georgia, when they get to the playoff scenario, you feel comfortable that they can perform at a high level. And I think the greatest thing that comes from that for me is having multiple things that you can do. Having multiple things that you can do. It's a breath of fresh air for your staff as they game plan to have more tools in the toolbox to go ahead and fix or create a game plan to go up against a defense that is elite and an elite team, than to not have those extra tools and resources and to say, well, man, this is what we have to work with. We're going to have to figure a way. We're going to have to figure something out with this. It is what it is, right? Would you rather have, a hammer and nails, or would you rather have an electric drill with the drill bits? It's like one is going to make the job a little bit easier. One is going to require a little bit more elbow grease. Yeah, you could probably get the job done, but one is going to be a little bit more difficult and a little less margin for error. And so now you talk about this is so, just from your coaching experience, bro, can you imagine the game plan and putting it together, how Mike Denbrock felt? Not that he doesn't put forth the same effort, but just, I don't think tension, but just having to figure something out with limited resources, the limited resources you had last year, in comparison to everything is on the table right now. We can really do everything. We can really attack defenses from every aspect. It's a lot more fun probably to put a game plan together now.
Well, it's just it's about, you talked about the hammer and nails, and then the reality is you know what makes the job even easier is when you have all those things. Because there's going to be some things that require hammer and nail, and it's nice to know that you have that. There's other things that are going to require something more big, whether it be a drill and drill bits or a giant machine that you can use to do things. I mean, there's to do a certain project, you need all those resources, right? I mean, there's some construction companies that can build sheds, and there's some and decks and patios, and that's all they can really do. That's all they really have the resources to do. There's others that can build homes, and there's others that can build skyscrapers. In the past, Mike Denbrock's been a guy that's either been able to, build a shed and work on your deck, and other years he's had the resources to build a home. And then there's been years he's had the resources to build a skyscraper. 2023 is one of those years. And I think this unit, to me, comes close to matching that 2023 team in potential. Now, do they have anyone as good as Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas? Maybe Brian Thomas, but not Malik Neighbors, no. At receiver. I would argue this, however. The gap between LSU's running backs in 2023 and Notre Dame's running backs is much greater in Notre Dame's favor than the gap in the receiver talent at LSU in 2023 and the receiver talent now. And so then it becomes about, okay, it's about who you play and all these other kind of things. And so what I'll say about this offensive unit, Shaun, is, do I think it's playing at an elite level right now, or can it be that based on what we know right now? I would say the answer to that is yes. And the reason I say that is because you can't just look at stats and say, well, they're doing this and these teams are bad, and so it means nothing. It could mean that. You have to be able to pop in the film and evaluate it and say, okay, are the things they're doing to find success now translatable to when you play better opponents? And the answer to that is yes. And so that's where I'm coming from, and say, that's why I've said, look, I would love a rematch against Miami. I may be stupid for saying that. A lot of people may disagree with me, but what I'm going to say is Miami is much closer defensively to being who they're going to be all year in that game than what Notre Dame's offense is going to be. And they're going to get better too. Don't get me wrong, because they've got new secondary players and things like that. But the point is when I look at how this offense is performing, I do think it translates better. And if they played Miami again, I would feel much better about how that game would go. Like if we were in an NFL schedule where you play, your conference rivals twice, I'd say I feel very bad for Miami when they come to play Notre Dame in November, and not just because it's going to be cold. And that's the way I look at it, Shaun, is like Notre Dame played about as bad as they could have played in that game, and offense and defensively, and still had the ball at the end of the game with a chance to win it. And so that's why I say, yeah, I do think this team can play at that level. And then, of course, we've seen what Miami's defense has done since then. And it just leads me to believe that, yeah, they play like this all year. They will score on everybody they play. And the thing is, they've scored the last two games 105 offensive points the last two games. Not total points, offensive points. Shaun, I don't know if you saw the article I wrote on Sunday. I almost missed my flight because I was doing the research for it. The last time Notre Dame scored 105 offensive points in back-to-back games, 105 or more, was 1977 with Joe Montana at quarterback. Now, I thought it was going to be 96 because I remember at the end of 96, they had those back-to-back games of 60 points against Rutgers and who's the other one? I think it was Pitt. And so I thought it was going to be then, but they had 3 punt returns in the second quarter against Pitt in 1996. Allen Rossum had 2, and then Archie Denson had the other. And then the game where they scored, no, that was against Rutgers, I think. And then the game against Pitt, Joey Goodspeed returned a block punt for a touchdown. They didn't get to 100 in those 2 games of offensive points. That says something, Shaun. I wasn't even alive at that point in time. Well, actually, I was, but I was still inside my mother's womb when that happened. That's the last time that happened. And so, like, that's an impressive feat, Shaun. I don't care who you're playing. You say, well, the schedule sucks. Well, they've had worse 2-game schedules in the last 30 years, or actually 48 years, than Arkansas and Purdue. And they've never done what they've done the last 2 games. And so that tells me something. It's because guys are playing better. Anthony Knapp is still a question mark in pass pro, but he hasn't been nearly as bad in that game. Why? How do I say that? I mean, it's not just because he's not giving up pressures, but I pointed out a play to you in the Arkansas game where his pass set was much better, to where even though he missed on the guy when he went, when he turned to make contact, he had his technique had widened the guy out so much that when he went around Anthony, he had no chance of getting to CJ. So those are things you look at and say that translates to a better performance. And if the offensive line would have simply played average football against Miami, Notre Dame's at worst 3-1 right now. And they're a top 10 team because their only loss is a 1-point home loss to a top 10 Texas A&M team. So like that's what you're doing now. Yeah. And it's not because of, well, you did this against Arkansas, which equals you statistically, which equals this against my. No, it's look at the film and say, is this guy playing better technically and effort-wise than he did in the first game? Is this guy making decisions that are similar to what he did, or is he just – because you see it all the time, Shaun. Guy plays the same football, but when the competition is better, he struggles, and when the competition is worse, he plays well.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at the film and say, he's actually not different. And this is kind of a point that I made about the Notre Dame defense against Arkansas. They didn't necessarily schematically play any better. They executed better. Not executed better. They performed better in the secondary, even though the scheme didn't change. So while that part's good, there's still some concern for me about the defense against better offenses, because some of the things that plagued them in the first couple games are still there. They're just not playing teams as good as what they played in the first two games. And their offense isn't playing as well. So those concerns still exist for me. I remember, Shaun, back in 08, 09. So 09, John Tenuta's first year. I remember Notre Dame beats Nevada, I think it was 38-0, 35-0. I remember after that game, I was telling people, like, dude, I don't like this defense. I don't feel good about this defense. And, oh, you're a hater and all this stuff. But you could just watch the film and see there's problems here. Nevada just couldn't take advantage of it. They had 7-8 drop passes in that game. There were guys wide open. Colin Kaepernick didn't see them. And there's all these different aspects. I remember watching 2014, and they shut out Michigan, and the defense is playing great. And I told people, I was like, guys, I don't know that this can continue, because you could see the film and see that there were holes, there were problems. And when teams get more film on you, you're going to be in trouble. So it's not just looking at data, it's watching the film. And when you watch this team play offense, really the last three games, you say they are legit dangerous, and they're going to get better.
Yeah.
And if they can find a way to get Jaden Greathouse in a good headspace when he comes back from injury and start using him more effectively, that's when I don't know how you stop this offense. Because with all due respect to Will Paulding, who's a nice football player, if you're a receivers coach who thinks Will Paulding is on the same level as Jaden Greathouse, I have to question your evaluations, because they're not. They're not. And that's, to me, the final link. But just what you're doing with the running backs, the tight ends, the receivers, honestly, the hardest part for Mike Denbrock now is, how do I keep everybody happy? Because you can dominate with a lot of different guys. And that's what makes this offense so dangerous for me, Shaun, is that I think that they are playing better, not just playing weaker teams.
Yeah.
Can it be a unit that can carry them on a deep playoff run? As long as the offensive line answers that one question that we talked about, my answer to that is yes.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't need, everyone's different. Some people need to see it. Some people need to see it against tougher competition. Like you said, having the chance to look at the all 22. Right, like we have a chance to we had a chance to see Kenny and CJ in practices. We had a chance to see certain things that fans don't get a chance to see, and we try to share those things. And we're trying to share today that, this team, whether you believe they are elite right now, they're literally one unit away being more consistent to kind of confirm that, because we already believe that they're playing at that level. And to move on from that, they won't get an opportunity to really prove it, to them, not to themselves, but to everybody else, unless they face, a big elite team in the playoff, and hopefully they get that opportunity. But it is without question the tools that you need in the toolbox to go up against great teams and elite defenses and be successful. They have it. They definitely have it. And so the numbers you point out, just historically, and what they're doing. Look, what's going to be interesting as well? You have to tip your cap to the decision to push Kenny and CJ back another year, where a lot of programs would have probably panicked and said, man, we could start one of these youngsters last year.
You mean like after Northern Illinois?
Yeah, well, not even that. Just to start the season, but like, don't even go to the portal.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, don't even go to the portal.
A year of development.
Say, we're going to the spring with Steve, and if one of the youngsters beats him out, then the schedule will allow it. The defense will allow it because we won't ask much of the quarterback. And there were other reasons why they went to the portal. Because they felt like what they had as a team. But I just think just pushing that out is going to even pay more dividends now, because you're going to have a quarterback that's going to be uber confident in his second season, in his third year in the offense, that will be losing possibly 2 elite running backs. So now he has to bear a little more weight, but he'll be well able to bear that weight now going into his second year with a running back room that's still going to be really good, but you might not have the dynamic tandem that you had before. So it's just really about how everything is going to mesh, right? So it'll look a little different next year, but it still has the potential to be elite offensively. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I love. And I think that goes to having those different things in your toolbox to be able to adjust and to be able to allow responsibility and accountability and more pressures to be applied in different areas this year versus the next year. That's when you get to having multiple years or stacking years of elite offensive play. And could it be a shift where something that we've had private conversations about, like, man, would Marcus Freeman really be open or allow the offense to kind of go to that level that's probably needed? Will he loosen the reins a little bit to go ahead and allow the offense to be that? And I think this is also an answer.
That on this show, each of the last 2 weeks, that was a giant concern of mine coming out of A&M.
Yes.
You have that game that's a shootout. You got a defensive-minded head coach who last year just seemed to like kind of always pull the reins on the offense early in the year. I'm sitting there thinking he's going to be like, look, guys, let's control the clock. Let's slow the game down. Let's limit possessions. And he didn't do that. I mean, so I've had some people say, well, they ran all over Purdue. I'm like, that aggressiveness doesn't equal throwing. It can. You can be aggressive going at a team and still run the football, which is what they did against Purdue because they were taking what Purdue get them. You can't. Were they really that aggressive? CJ only threw the ball 4 times. Yeah, exactly. They were, because first of all, the first pass of the game was a deep shot, and the second part is they were going right after. They were pushing the pace. They were going with some tempo. They were absolutely aggressively going after Purdue. They were looking to hit home runs every time they handed the ball off, it seemed. And so that's been a good thing, because, Shaun, I remember us sitting here on show about this time a year ago. We're getting ready to go into the Louisville game, and we're really unhappy with some of the things Marcus Freeman has done as a head coach with the offense and some of the comments he made. Remember I mean, it's literally not a year ago today, because I don't know the actual date, but like a year ago in the season at this point in time. I remember the post-game show, you and I were losing our minds because of what Marcus Freeman said before the game. And not that he said it, but that the game plan then carried out exactly what he said. You're going to let Miami of Ohio dictate to you how this game is going to go. Seriously? Well, fast forward to, a season later, and we're at the same spot, and Marcus Freeman is absolutely telling his offense, go do what you do. And I hope that continues. But that is good to see, Shaun. That is because it's him recognizing this is the strength of our team, and we're going to have to play to the strength of our team. Going to absolutely have to do that.
And I think he envisions at some point he's going to walk on the field with elite defense and offense. Like, whether it be the end of this year, whether it's next year, like at some point,
coordinator,
they're going to get it to the point where they have both.
Yeah.
And now, now you're talking
about. That's
what
frustrates me so much about this season. Do you know the last time? See, you done did it. You didn't mean to, but you done did it. I'm gonna have to go here real quick. Do you know the last time Notre Dame had more? So they've had 1,100 and last two games they've had 1,176 yards. You know the last time they had more than that in back-to-back games? You know what year that was? 2016.
Really?
They had
that season?
Yep. They had 1,188 yards in back-to-back games against Duke and Syracuse. They had 534 yards against Syracuse, and Duke, and they had 654 yards against Syracuse. Now, they ran 146 plays in those two games. The last 2 weeks, they've only run 135, so they've gone for more yards per play. But that was another season that was ruined with a pretty darn good freaking offense because your defense was trash. And I really hope that Marcus Freeman is going to do what he needs to do to make sure the defense is there, because this is the final piece of this, Shaun. If they're actually – so the offense is playing at a level where they can make a deep playoff run. Like, I think we agreed on that. And they're going to get better, in my opinion. I'm not saying they're going to go from, 44 points a game to 64 points a game, you know what I mean? But they're just going to be more efficient, and that's what we're going to see. And it's I think, and that doesn't mean every game's going to be each better than the last one. It just means they're going to the bar has been raised for this offensive football team significantly. It's what we thought was going to happen under Mike Denbrock. I would argue it's maybe happened about a half a season sooner than I thought it was going to. Like, what we saw the last two games is, honestly, Shaun, is kind of what I thought we'd see coming out of the second bye. I thought this is what Notre Dame was going to do to BC and Navy coming out of the second bye.
People laughed at him. People chuckled. Go back and listen to his introductory press conference when he returned. Or it might have been his spring press conference when he said, I came back to bring a top 5 offense to match the top 5 defense. Mm-hmm. People like, what? Notre Dame top 5 offense? Like, what? Like, coach, come on, man.
Yep.
Come on, man. And it's like, now, it's like, yeah, that's the mindset he had from the jump. And so for them to be doing this right now, it, like you said, it is frustrating. But at the same time, I'll be honest. It's kind of refreshing. It's kind of refreshing, right? Because I feel much better going into a matchup with an elite team with this offense than an elite defense having to be elite.
Yes, that's fair.
And having to hold that elite team down and hoping we can get some things on offense. It's a much better feeling knowing that, okay, give the defense time to come along, and we know what this offense is going to do. I don't know how you feel about that, but going up against an elite team in a playoff setting,
in today's era, yes. Having said that, in theory, yes. I still don't love the fact that you are doing that with a redshirt freshman quarterback. I think that's putting a lot on CJ Carr's shoulders every week to say, hey, man, let's go get us 50 this week so we can win this football game. The defense has to get better. If this team is going to make another deep run, then because that doesn't just mean like I'm overlooking the rest of the opponents. I'm not. What I'm saying is to not get upset by anybody moving forward, the defense has to get better. I'm not someone who's like, oh, the way the offense is playing, they're just going to roll through the next 8 games. No, I don't think that's necessarily true at all. Because there's a couple teams on the schedule that my concern is that you could score 40 plus and lose. So, like, that's a lot to put on a redshirt freshman. A lot to put on a redshirt freshman. So the defense is going to have to get better. The point, though, is if the offense is genuinely elite, here's where it impacts the defense. They don't have to be last year, Shaun. They don't. They don't have to be last year's defense. They don't have to hold people to 15 points a game. They don't have to hold Georgia to 10. I mean, the way this year's team is playing, if you hold Penn State to 24 points, you're putting your backups on the field in the final drive of the game. I mean, that's how they're playing right now. I mean, it's a team where you say, okay, hey, you can win a shootout with Ohio State right now. That's if you have a solid defense. Now, you're not winning a shootout with Ohio State right now because they're going to be able to make enough stops of your offense, and it only takes 2 or 3 to outscore you because of how bad the defense has been all year. What I'm saying is if the defense simply just becomes solid to good, that's when you can do those things. That's what LSU was in 2019. I'm not saying this is 2019 LSU. I'm not saying that. I'm making the point that an offense can be good enough to be that type of team. Because if you look at LSU in 2019, Shaun, they had a good defense, but it wasn't special. I mean, that defense gave up 21.9 points per game. They gave up 25 points in the title game, 28 points in the semifinal game, gave up 37 points to Ole Miss, 41 points to Alabama, 28 points to Florida, 38 points to Vandy, 38 points to Texas. They weren't a great team. They won undefeated because in those 2 games, they gave up 53 points in the playoffs, but they scored 105. They gave up 37 points to Ole Miss and still won by 3 touchdowns. Gave up 28 points to Florida, still won by 2 touchdowns. Gave up 38 points to Vanderbilt and still beat them by 4 touchdowns. That's the point. Is it's not comparing them to LSU, saying they're as good as LSU. I'm simply making a point of pointing to a recent champion that didn't have a great defense, but their defense was still good. When they got into that game against Auburn and the offense wasn't playing well, their defense could make the stops in that particular game with Dave Aranda leading the way to say, okay, we need to step up and win this one. Cool, we got you. I don't know that this defense right now is good enough, even for the next 8 regular season games, much less the postseason, that if there's a day where the offense is having an off day, like even LSU's 2019 offense had, like even Clemson's 2018 team had. I mean, let's not forget Clemson in 2018, Trevor Lawrence starts, he gets hurt, and that team has to go out in 2018 and beat Syracuse 27-23. Their defense, their offense didn't play great at BC that year. Only scored 27 points, but they still won by 20 because their defense stepped up and made plays. Their offense got shut down in the first 28 minutes of the game against Notre Dame, but it was okay. They set a lead because their defense was playing at an elite level. And so even the best teams, the best offenses have off days. LSU had one in 2019. The problem with this team is my fear is if it happens against a good team, I don't trust the defense right now to be good enough. Now, that's just where we are now. They can get better, and I hope that they'll get better. And they got better against Arkansas. Not as much better as the results showed, but still better. You can't dismiss the improvement we saw from the secondary and the fact that there was a few more pressures and say they didn't make any changes. They did make changes. It is as much as we like? No. Let's just see them keep building on that. But if they can keep building on that, Shaun, then I think this defense is going to be good enough to where they can make that kind of run. But it's going to have to happen relatively quickly because the next 3 weeks you're playing offenses that can outscore you if your offense has an off day. And I think this is the defining stretch in Notre Dame season because I really feel like, Shaun, once they come out of the bye, this is going to sound like anyone can beat you on your schedule from here on out if you play like you did against Northern Illinois and Stanford and Marshall. We can agree on that. I'm just saying if this offense just plays 75% of its best football of what it's been, coming out of the bye, the only team with a shot to beat you is Navy. And that's simply because you can't stop the triple option and you have 5 possessions. And like 1 turnover, that they're going to beat all those other teams. Now, they may be ugly, they may be shootouts, but they're going to beat those teams. The only teams, in my opinion, that are good enough on either side of the ball to say, hey, if your offense has an off day, we're going to beat you, is the next 3. Boise, NC State, and USC. Now, I don't think any of those defenses can hang with Notre Dame. The premise is not that if Notre Dame plays their A game, those teams are good enough to beat them. If Notre Dame plays their A game, I don't know if anybody can beat them if they play their A game on both sides of the ball. That's how good I think this roster is. I'm saying if the offense is not playing its A game, let's say they have a C+ or a B- game, these next 3 opponents can beat you. That's my point. I don't think Pitt can beat Notre Dame. I don't think Stanford and Syracuse can beat Notre Dame. Not now. Maybe if Steve was still there and the way that they were playing against Clemson, sure, if your offense has a bad day, the way your defense is playing, they could have maybe outscored you. Stanford has no chance. BC has no chance, in my opinion. The offense would have to play a D game for those teams to beat Notre Dame. These next 3 are the only teams that have a shot if the offense plays anything from a B- or above. A B or above, I should say. That's what I think makes this stretch important.
Yeah,
but
I would agree with that.
I don't know that I felt that way for a long time about an offensive football team.
No.
Even 2009, that offense could score, but that team couldn't run the ball like this team can run the ball.
Right.
This offensive line is astronomically better than the one Jimmy played behind. Incredibly. I mean, could you imagine, for all the frustration that people have with this offensive line, could you imagine what Jimmy Clausen would have done in 2009 if he had this offensive line? I mean, goodness gracious, that would have been fun to watch. That'd been real fun to watch. So, yeah, that's what we're going to learn, Shaun, here over the next few weeks. So, any final points about this offense? It's been fun to watch, man. And this is what you and I expected to happen eventually under Mike Denbrock. And I think you and I both felt it could happen sooner rather than later, because when Mike Denbrock got hired, we knew that the kid at under center at quarterback had a chance to be a special player. And if he wasn't, then the other kid behind him was going to end up stepping in and being a special player. But this is a kid that has a shot to be a special talent.
I would like to mention one particular individual that in the midst of this, I think has answered some questions. And that's wide receiver coach Mike Brown. He's answered some questions on the recruiting trail. Getting a chance to see him coach at the Invasion. Watching the film. Look, Jaden Greathouse hasn't been targeted as much as he probably would want, as much as fans would want, as much as we would want. But you don't see a drop off in his effort, especially in blocking. You don't see it. Like this wide receiving core, as Jordan Faison talked about this week, like even within that room, it's almost like a competition amongst each other when it comes to blocking. Like the buy-in, just even with certain things, just like urgency in the route running, like you said, certain things that lacked, going back 2 seasons. I think his impact and what he's added to the wide receivers, I think, because it's easy to talk about Jawan Sider because of the running backs. Easy to talk about that. We focus on Joe Rudolph and the offensive line for obvious reasons, right? Gino, of course, deserves credit for what we're seeing. A ton of credit for what we're seeing. I think what we've seen from both young quarterbacks.
I was going to say the same thing from both. How Kenny threw the ball when he came back in the game. And then Kenny, what was the mistake Kenny made in the first game he came in? He had a deep ball. What did he do? Threw it late. What did he do the next game when he came in and had a shot to throw another deep ball? Dropped it. And then also what Steve was doing at Syracuse before he got hurt.
Yeah.
You can't take that away from.
You can't take it away from Gino.
And this, what we said was, we don't know how good of a coach Gino is. He's never had a chance to coach a player he developed. It's always been some veteran that they're renting for a season from somebody else. This was going to be the year we find out. And so far, it's been really good. And it's not just, CJ's a unique talent, Shaun. We can say that. He's a unique talent. He was obviously groomed as in a football world with his dad, who's a college quarterback, and his uncle or his grandfather, obviously he's a national championship winning coach. But it's not just that. It's even just the improvement we've seen from CJ week to week to week to week, just in 4 games. You see those type of things. So it's that none of them are perfect. Like Mike Brown, what frustrates me is if Mike Brown wasn't making the personnel decisions that he's making that bother me, like having basically Jaden Greathouse be a rotation player in the slot and Malachi and Jordan Faison dominating the outside snaps, I think that's a mistake. And not because they're not really talented players. It's twofold. Number one is Jaden Greathouse is a dog, and he proved that last year, and he needs to play more, and he needs to get more opportunities. The other part of it is this team runs a ton of vertical routes, and you're putting a lot on the legs of Malachi Fields and Jordan Faison running downfield a ton and not giving them necessarily the breathers they need to kind of be fresh over the course of an entire season. It's twofold. Outside of that, to your point, the things that you can evaluate from are they being coached well standpoint, it's much improved. Much improved. Malachi is a more fundamentally sound player this year than he was at Virginia last year. Jordan Faison's become a more fundamentally sound player. Jaden Greathouse has become a more fundamentally sound player. We're seeing that across the board. Micah Gilbert is performing better when he comes in, So I think in that regard, Mike Brown absolutely is doing a much better job. I just wish he would just fix that one thing when Jaden Greathouse comes back, because I know you have a great relationship with Will Pauling. You recruited him out of high school. You've known him longer than Jaden Greathouse. And I think Will Pauling's a good football player that can help this football team. There's no doubt. But him and Jaden Greathouse should not be in a rotation with each other. And we shouldn't be 4 games in, and Will Pauling's been targeted more than Jaden Greathouse. That's the one mistake I think he's made. But the coaching has been good. I mean, you look at the job they're doing with the tight ends, and obviously Mike Denbrock deserves part of that credit, but then also Joe Rudolph and Harris Biven deserve some credit, because you lost your 2 blockers on this team. I mean, you lost the 2 guys who were supposed to be your blockers in Kevin Bauman, obviously, and Cooper, especially Cooper Flanagan. And you watch what Ty Washington's done the last couple of weeks as a run blocker. Not just against Arkansas. Like the Arkansas game, you could kind of pass off as like, well, he had a little extra something that game, because he did. But you go watch the Purdue game only, and you're like, this kid's not a bad blocker at 6'4", 240. And Eli Raridan has been a horse running as a run blocker the last few weeks. So I think that they were not – a comment I made, and I stand by it because it was true. A comment I made coming out of Texas A&M is, this is not a well-coached football team in any phase of the game. Defensively, I still believe that to be true, outside of, a couple things here and there. But the offense, just from a fundamental standpoint, a technical standpoint, a knowing your job and doing your job in just 2 games, has gotten astronomically better. Because here's the thing. Your opponent, the talent of your opponent, doesn't necessarily dictate whether or not you know how to do your job or if you can play in sound football. To a degree it does, because there's more pressure on you when you're playing a really talented opponent. But it doesn't necessarily dictate it. We've seen this offense get better each and every week, and that's something that encourages me. And I also think that it's a unit, Shaun, that I don't think is peaked. And as I pointed out yesterday, this is something crazy. Here's the rankings for the defenses that they play, scoring defenses that they play the remainder of the season. 75th, 100th, 64th, 98th, 30th, that's Navy, 60th, 112th, and 111th. Here is the passing defenses that Notre Dame is going to face the rest of the year. 42nd, 119th, 107th, 60th, 59th, 91st, 132nd, and 135th. That's the pass defenses they face in the next 8 games. So by far the best pass defense they're going to face statistically the next 8 games is the one they're going to play on Saturday, which should tell us, Shaun, the kind of the test we're going to see. This is not there are more talented secondaries on the schedule remaining, definitely more talent in secondaries. I don't know that there's a secondary that is coached as well as this BC secondary is. They're very well coached. The point I made yesterday, Shaun, and I'm curious if you agree with this before we move on to the final piece, is I think there's 3 or 4 secondaries that have better talent than Boise State's. This is not a vintage Boise State defense talent-wise. What I like about this football team, or what I like about Boise State, is this is probably the best coach defense that they're going to face the rest of the way. That's my 2 cents. And that's what makes this challenging. You're going to have to be fundamentally sound and smart and all those type of things against this unit to play at the level they're capable of playing.
This is why I said Notre Dame eventually in this game, this is going to be a grinded out game. And I'm not talking about like the defensive battle, anything like that, but it's going to be a mental grind because Boise State is going to force you to beat them. They don't beat themselves. The key stat for me, and, I understand, like, yeah, they really haven't played anybody. Who has it come against? But we pointed out, Morgan and the interior kid, I forget his name right now. The defensive tackle for Boise State, Braxton Feely. Thank you. So, look, they don't give up sacks, and they sack the quarterback. 1 every 8 drop back, they get a sack this year. Now, they face some teams that really don't throw the ball a lot, so those numbers can be skewed a little bit, but those are the numbers right now. So for me, you talk about the challenge to the offensive line and the defensive line this week. Get pressure. First, stop the run. Get pressure. And then protect CJ. If they protect CJ, they're going to make plays. Why? Because this Boise State offense, in order to be effective, has to give up something. They have to give up something. Whether it's play-to-play, series. Have to have. All right? We're putting 8 in the box to stop these running backs. Okay? You got the mismatch outside. Whether it's off-man, zone, or they decide every now and then to go man-to-man bump and run, you have the advantage. Execute. Running backs, you've been really good in pass pro this year. You're going to need to be really good this week because we're expecting them to light us up. Everybody just do your job and just grind it out. Just grind it out. This is not where teams are just going to be blowing coverages like you faced the last 2 weeks. Man, you're going to have to do your job, right? Grind it out. Put them in a position, put them behind, and then they might have to get a little bit more desperate, from that standpoint. And then you can really go attack and kind of see them fall apart at the seams. Well, I don't see them falling apart at the seams. I think they're going to play hard, but that's when the talent takes over. Like, okay, now we're just overwhelming them. Now we're getting chunk plays, pass game, run game. They're off balance. They don't know what to really do. And now we have so many things, so many different ways we can attack them. It's just become too much. I just think early on, you're just going to have to be consistent. Even if they get you off the field on one of the early drives, like just go right back at it. Don't worry about that. Go right back at it. Put points on the board. And 7 is going to mean so much more this week. Getting touchdowns is going to mean so much more, right? Because you're in a space as a defense where even if they move the ball, your defense is going to have the mindset, man, just hold them to 3. Let's just hold them to a field goal attempt. That's a win. You have to feel like with the offense we have, whether it's getting them off the field and getting a punt to get back to the offense or getting a team to kick a field goal, that's a win. Because you have to feel right now, you have to feel we're getting 7s. You're gonna have to keep up with our 7s. And 3s are not gonna do it. 3s are not gonna do it. So that I think the pressure is really on. There's extreme pressure on Boise State tomorrow to be a little more aggressive, especially in the red zone, to make sure that they get 7 points. That, to me, not just, keep the ball away from the Notre Dame offense. No, keep the ball away, run the ball, and score touchdowns. Because putting up 3 points, that's almost a wasted drive against this Notre Dame offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's deflating.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for the offensive show, Shaun. We're going to talk a little college football next, folks, so do not go away. And we're going to have some fun with that, absolutely. There's a lot to talk about there. But before we do, folks, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And as always, make sure you are signed up for our message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We have recruiting content over there. But more importantly, the big thing is we have tons of film breakdowns. We have analysis. We have things that we provide there that we don't provide anywhere else, including our Upon Further Review, which now we break down into 3 or 4 different video segments. It's only available on the premium message board. And so, Shaun, it was actually available on my Vimeo page, unbeknownst to me, but somebody emailed me this week and let me know that that was the case. So I was able to make those things private. So now it is definitely only available on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Mr. Davis, well, let's talk about some college football, man. This is the final part of RTCF, recruiting team college football. That's what that stands for. And, it's been a wild year, Shaun. It's been a wild year. It really has. And there's a lot of takeaways. You and I were talking about all the different potential topics we could talk about today. And you were just like, let's just talk about kind of what have we learned at the quarter point of the season, because we really are. Most teams are at the quarter point of the season. There's some teams that played 5. Hawaii's played 6, but most teams are at 4. And what have we learned about those teams? And so that's what we're going to do, Shaun. So we're just going to kind of go back and forth. We're going to kind of talk, teams, then we'll talk some players, and then we're going to talk some trends. So, Shaun, I want to kick it off with you. When you look at just different teams, you can look at it any way you want it. What's the first thing that you feel like we've learned so far through the 1/3 of the way through the college football season?
You need 2 quarterbacks. You need 2 quarterbacks on your roster. Like, you look at teams like, right, what Oklahoma's going through right now. Like, they lose John Mateer, right? You look at Tennessee, Aguilar hasn't been injured yet, but he has a history of being injured. You look at Syracuse being on a run and they lose Steve Angeli. Does that tank their season and all the possibilities they had? They had to feel like after that Clemson win or halfway through that Clemson win, like, yo, we might make a run to an ACC championship. Like, there's a chance. You got to have, dude, Marcus Freeman said it. We might need both of these guys this year. I just think the way college football is right now, there is more emphasis from what I see on just making sure that you have 2 quarterbacks that can operate the offense and that you can win football games with. That stands out to me because I'm watching a lot of teams that had a lot of promise lose quarterbacks. Look at Ole Miss. Simmons was one of the guys. Austin Simmons, we raved about him. We couldn't wait to see, him with the reins of the offense down at Ole Miss, and he goes down, and then Chambliss comes in, and he's just like, this kid is pretty good, right? Like, people were comparing.
I remember asking why they went after him I think I might have even said that in a show. Like, why'd they go after this kid? Yeah. Like, and why would he go to Ole Miss? You're not going to start there. And now see why. To your point, now you see why. Because you never know what's going to happen. Austin Simmons gets hurt, that kid comes in and plays really good football. Right. Here's one for me, Shaun. You talk about what we've learned is we're a third of the way through the season. Most teams have played 4 games. Some have played 5. Yeah. I don't see a single team right now that's elite, nor do I see a team like last year's Ohio State team. Mm-hmm. Even when they lost to Oregon, you're like, dude, they went on the road and lost to Oregon by a point. And I felt about that game like I felt about Notre Dame against Miami, where I was like, they didn't even play very well and still almost went on the road and beat a top 10 team.
Yep.
And then you watch them against Michigan, and they never showed it, but you always felt like that team could become an elite team. And I don't see anybody like that this year, including Ohio State. And not Notre Dame either, because you knew Ohio State's offense was going to eventually get figured out last year. Their defense was elite. This year, Notre Dame's offense is elite. But I don't have the faith in the Notre Dame defense like I had in the Ohio State offense last year. I knew they were going to eventually figure it out. Yeah. You had a transfer quarterback, was getting used to playing with a freshman receiver and a bunch of new guys, and your offensive line was dealing with some injuries, and you just kind of felt like they're eventually going to click. Now, I'll be honest, they clicked later than I thought they were going to click. I thought they'd click in November. They didn't click until the playoffs. But I don't see a team like that right now through a third of the season. Yeah. Miami – right now, Josh Pate had Miami as the number 1 team in the country. If that's the best team in college football right now, then Notre Dame will win a championship this year, because like they're going to beat everybody. They're not. Ohio State's my number 1 team, and their defense is playing elite football right now, like elite football. And so I just look at it and say, even Ohio State, because like Ohio State's offense is, I mean, they've scored 38 points combined against their 2 Power 4 opponents. so far this year. They scored 14 points in a win over Texas and 24 in a win over Washington. Now, that's not saying their offense isn't good. That's all they need to do. When you have a defense that only gives up 7 and 6 points in those 2 games against Arch Manning and DeMond Williams, like your defense is legit. I just think if their defense ever falters, is that offense going to be good enough to go win them a football game? That's how I feel about the Notre Dame defense. If the offense has a bad day, like, so even there, I don't know that there's any elite teams in college football right now, Shaun. And I don't know if there's a team that's on the verge of becoming that elite team so far. Somebody will. I just don't know who it is at this point. I really don't.
Another thing for me that's really standing out goes to your point. Because there are no elite teams, it really is kind of Jekyll and Hyde with a lot of teams. And one of these teams is eventually going to figure out the right serum to make sure that they don't switch week to week, right? And you can use Alabama. Is this the weekend that we see, the alternate Miami against Florida State, who Florida State has proved they can score points. They scored points against Virginia. They just couldn't stop anybody. So we're going to see the Florida State defense that was able to shut down Alabama's offense and dominate them in that big offensive line. When that big offensive line went and beat Georgia and broke their home winning streak, like, it's so many different things that it throws the transitive property out of the window. Like, there is no transitive property in college football this year, right? And now, with revenge on their mind, coming off a big win, does Alabama slip up against Vanderbilt, who's one of the hottest offenses in college football, with Diego Pavia playing as well as a lot of quarterbacks in college football and just really being a leader? He's just really one of the best leaders in college football right now, and backing up the talk that he put out there at SEC Media Week over the summer. So for me, that's what stands out, right? Which team is going to be able to kind of figure it out and end like this Jekyll and Hyde thing? And that's when you'll start to see, teams become Oregon this week and Indiana, both coming off tests on the road. Does Indiana prove that they have taken that step? Does Oregon prove that we are the elite of the Big Ten, beating Penn State and Indiana in back-to-back weeks? If they do that, then you start to look at Oregon and say, hey, maybe Oregon's one of those teams.
That's next week? That's next week they play?
Yeah, I think it is next week. I think it is next week.
Yeah. That's going to be a monster game, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, I can't wait for that one. Cannot wait for that one.
Here's
an interesting statement, Shaun. The Big Ten has become the new SEC. And here's what I mean by that.
Okay.
A top-heavy league that gets credit as an entire conference because of how good the top is, but the middle and bottom is overrated.
Very questionable. Yes.
The SEC has become the old Big Ten, where they maybe don't have that top-level team or maybe only one that can compete with the top 3 or 4 in the other league, but they're much deeper. I take their middle teams and bottom teams over the big. We've seen a bit of a role reversal. I don't think it's debatable to say that the league with the best 4 teams is the Big Ten, and I don't think it's close.
And I think they have switched positions from a business aspect. I think the Big Ten has taken the chance to become the bully, inside the boardroom. And we saw evidence from that this summer. They've recognized that and said, hey, we have the leverage now, And I think you saw the importance of the Notre Dame game to Greg Sankey when he was here for Notre Dame, Texas A&M. He knew how important on the national landscape, how important that game was to his conference, being able to be impactful in the playoff. He knew. Yep. He probably paid the referees too, but outside of the normal pay, but that's another. But no, all jokes aside, I agree with you totally. I do think the Big Ten has kind of become that conference where I think the Big Ten has tier 1, tier 2, or if you want to say tier 1 and tier 1B, where you have Indiana. Indiana's probably proven they're still above Illinois, but Illinois is right there hovering right under the teams that are at the top. I think Michigan is probably dropped a little bit, but still kind of hovering. Because let me ask you a question. Is there something that is comparable when it comes to Kirby getting over Alabama, and Ryan Day getting over Michigan? Is there something in both of those matchups where those two teams that are really good teams have not been able to get over it? Man, doesn't matter how good they are, these two or who the coaches are, these teams give them problems. What is it? Is there something that is a connection between both of those things that you can see that's like, all right?
I do think there becomes a bit of a mental block there. The thing about Michigan and Ohio State is you go into those games and Michigan's like, they're confident, they're playing well. There's no pressure on them. Everybody's like, this is the year Ohio State gets back to them. This is the year that and there was no pressure on Michigan in those games because everybody still felt Ohio State was the better team. Everybody still predicted Ohio State to win. And Ohio State's players are feeling the pressure of getting back to that win streak. So you look at it and say, like, dude, this is like, what do we have to lose? Everybody thinks we're going to lose anyway. Let's just go play ball. And I think the team that struggles in that rivalry starts putting more pressure on itself. We got to get this one. We got to get this one. We got to get this one. The other thing is sometimes, and I think one difference between the Michigan and Ohio State rivalry is I think a lot of these years Alabama's just been better than Georgia. I mean, they're a better team than Georgia most of these years. That's a big part of this is that. And so I think when I look at that, Trev or Shaun, you guys look a lot different. When I look at that, I think that, I mean, like, I thought Alabama was going to beat Georgia because I think they had the better roster. Like, that's why I think they won. Because you could have said, well, it's Nick Saban, but now he's 0-2 against Kalen DeBoer. Well, I think Alabama had a better roster than Georgia did last year when they played. Now, Alabama kind of deteriorated after that, and there was a lot of reasons why. But I think they just had a better roster most of these years. Look, let's be honest about something, too. Georgia doesn't win the title in 2021, in my opinion, if Jamison Williams and I'm drawing a complete blank here, John Mechie, both get hurt by Mechie got hurt again the first Georgia game, and then Jamison Williams went down after catching a long pass in the championship game. I don't know that Georgia wins those two games. That's really the only time they've beaten Bama. Was in a rematch where you're getting a depleted Bama team. So I think that's part of it too, is I just think that Georgia's doesn't play Alabama enough. If Georgia got to play Alabama every year, they'd have more wins. If Georgia would have played Bama in 2022, they would have got another win.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of it too. And the thing that hurt them in I actually think Georgia had a better team in 23. But what hurt Georgia in 23 was the East was so bad that I don't think they were prepared. Like, they had trouble early on catching up to speed with Bama. I don't know that Bama had the better roster. I think Bama was just more battle-tested in that game. And that's what hurt Georgia. And I said that all year. This Georgia team is playing a terrible schedule. And so I think
that year they struggled at Vanderbilt that year.
Yeah.
I think because that's when Brock got hurt in that game. And it was a little closer. Yeah. And like you said, they really hadn't played anyone. Yeah. Yep. It's amazing. I think the other thing, like the mind game part of it, is that in both, I think somehow, some way, there is a formula that has kind of shown up where Michigan gets out early. Michigan is able to play their style of game. They impose how they want the game to go. Alabama has been able to get out early and make Georgia play from behind and impose their style of game. And so that is something I think in both series has been very interesting. Like Kirby talked about that. Like, dude, we can't keep getting down double digits every time we face them and then climb ourselves out of a hole. And then, that's a lot. That's a lot. You're talented enough to do it, but it's a lot to do, right? And then Michigan just gets out front and just kind of Ohio State can't seem to make the plays to get back in it.
Because I think when you're already going into a game with that pressure, when things start going in the opposite direction, you have trouble. Like you now put even more pressure on yourself in those situations. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. So I think the SEC is an interesting league, Shaun, because I think it's a very deep league, like incredibly deep league this year. I mean, Auburn's one of the worst teams in the league, and they went on the road and beat Baylor. Like you look at the league top to bottom, and I mean, Kentucky's not very good. Florida's not very good. Arkansas's not very good. South Carolina right now is not playing really good. But, Kentucky has got a 7-point loss to Ole Miss. They beat Toledo pretty convincingly. It ended up being an 8-point game, but it was like 24-3 at one point in time. Florida's not very good, but like they lost 26-7 to Miami. So they, that was not a blowout game. I mean, they're not very good, but they're not god awful. They were a preseason top 25 team. Arkansas is not very good, but they were 6 points away from beating, tying Ole Miss and a point away from tying an undefeated Memphis team, and then blew out Arkansas State. So I mean, even the bad teams in that league. I mean, the 2 losses for South Carolina were to Vanderbilt and Missouri on the road, 2 ranked teams, and then they blew out Kentucky this past weekend. So, and then I look at the middle and bottom of the Big Ten, and it's not nearly as good. Like there's a much bigger gap between the top of the Big Ten and the rest. For 2 reasons, then compared to the SEC, 2 reasons. One is, like I said, I think the top of the Big Ten is better than the top of the SEC. And I don't know that it's all that close. But then the middle and bottom is not very good for the Big Ten. Whereas for the SEC, there's a lot of really good teams in that league. This might be, like I'm looking at it, Shaun, and there's Ole Miss, Missouri, Vandy, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, LSU. That's 8 teams, and then Texas. I don't know that Tennessee, you could maybe throw Tennessee, so let's say Tennessee. That's 10 teams that have a shot to win the SEC this year, legitimately have a shot to win the SEC. Some more than others. Where you look at the Big Ten, and the Big Ten this year has Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, maybe Penn. I don't think Penn State has a shot. They're not going to beat Ohio State at Ohio State. There's no way they're going to beat Ohio State at Ohio State, in my opinion. 4, I mean, Maryland's undefeated. Maryland's not going to, they're not a contender in the Big Ten. Minnesota's only got 1 loss. They're not a contender in the Big Ten. That's twofold. Again, it's because the top teams in the Big Ten are better than the top 4 teams in the SEC. But I also think that middle part, that's what's going to make this SEC. I think for Notre Dame needing chaos, I think a lot of it's going to come from the SEC, where you're just going to have a lot of teams beating up on each other. This year, the SEC should be able to make an argument they tried to make last year that just didn't fly, because the league wasn't as good last year. This year, I think that, and I don't think it's just because the top teams are coming down. I think the middle and bottom teams have also got it. Mississippi State is a much better football team this year than they were last year. Like Vanderbilt is a much better football team this year. Missouri is a lot better than I thought they were going to be, Shaun. I watched them play Kansas, and I was like, this is a legitimately decent football team. So it's
I think you can watch that. I think Missouri. The shock is, we didn't think Bo Prabula was going to be that impactful. We've expected Mendoza to be impactful. We didn't know John Mateer would be as impactful as he's
didn't know.
Been.
It was like,
didn't know.
You thought
how is it going?
That's a big jump, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And Aguilar, like, okay,
Blake,
what is he going to bring at Blake Shapen in Mississippi State? Yeah. I think what we're seeing is like, if you find, and Notre Dame fans know this, sometimes, it might not be the perfect fit, but finding a guy at quarterback in the portal can really kind of like give you an opportunity to have a really good season, and and make
especially
it.
if you
We
can find
talked
a
it.
guy for multiple years. You're
Yes.
seeing that with Vanderbilt. Diego Pavia is a much better player this year than he was last. He was good last year, but he's even better
Yeah.
this year. You're seeing that with a lot of these quarterbacks that are now 2-year guys, that they're even better in their second year than they were in their first year.
Yeah.
I think the portal quarterback thing is interesting, Shaun. And then there's some portal talk overall that I know you want to bring up. But this year we're seeing like last year there was, I felt, really only 3 portal quarterbacks that had a significant impact on their teams. Significant. Well, 4, because Diego Pavia had a significant impact at Vanderbilt. Even though they went 6-6, they're probably a 3-9 team without him. You could find a guy here, find a guy there. But I think the 3 of Will Howard, Riley Leonard, and Cam Ward were really the 3 that had like the big impacts on their teams last year. After that, it was like, Diego Pavia here, the guy over here was solid. You look at this year, Shaun, you have seen teams just completely and dramatically turn their seasons around. And the quarterback is a big part of it. Because like Curtis Rourke had an impact in Indiana. I just don't think his impact was as great as maybe, like maybe people thought it was, because he played so poorly against the good teams that they played. But you look at this year, Shaun, and you're looking at obviously Trinidad Chambliss. Fernando Mendoza is a far more dynamic player this year than what Curtis Rourke was last year, which we talked about in the preseason. You look at John Mateer, what he was doing. You look at Chandler Morris at Virginia. I mean, that I don't even recognize that football team right now with what they're doing on offense with Chandler Morris, a quarterback. It's amazing when we said this last year, they got decent weapons. Their running backs are decent. Their receivers are good. They just had a bad O-line and a bad quarterback. Their O-line's gotten better, but their quarterback play is so much better than last year. You look at what Thomas Castellanos has done at Florida State, like you mentioned, Joey Aguilar at Tennessee, Carson Beck at Miami, Bo Perbula at Missouri, Darian Mensah at Duke. I'm just continue to go down the list here. Let's go down here real quick. You've got Devin Dampier at Utah has had a big impact there. Miller Moss at Louisville has had a big impact. Bear Bachmeier's doing a really nice job as a runner thrower at BYU right now. So you're seeing a really big impact from transfer quarterbacks. And I do not count Ryan Brown as one of those transfer quarterbacks because he played for them last year. But even Connor Wegman's done a nice job at Houston. I mean, he's a competent quarterback, and they're a better team with a competent quarterback. They're 4-0 now. Had a really nice come-from-behind win over Oregon State, had a blowout win over Colorado. You're seeing a much greater impact. Blake Shapen, we talked about at Mississippi State, the job he's done at Mississippi State. We're seeing a much bigger impact from, in my opinion, from transfer quarterbacks. Dylan Lonergan at Boston College is another one who's performing well. His team's not very good, but he's playing very well. We're seeing a lot of transfer quarterbacks. Steve Angeli, before his knee injury, was performing very well. Steve was doing a really nice job at Syracuse before his injury. The portal quarterbacks have done way better, and there's way more impact on the college football season than last year, which is saying something when you consider the 2 title teams that played for the title and then Heisman runner or third place in the Heisman Trophy voting were all transfer quarterbacks. But it was just kind of them. This year, I think the whole sport's been kind of turned upside down because of a lot of these decisions that teams have made of who they've been able to go out and get in the portal at quarterback. Just have completely changed some teams around, Shaun. Not alone, but have certainly played a big role in it.
I think that, for me, is very telling, because it leads to, I don't know if we want to get into it right now, but I just think the science of the portal has changed. Mm-hmm. I think the science of the transfer portal and how to implement it properly inside your program, because I think it used to be a free-for-all, right? And now I think, just really scouring the multitude of young men, whether it's FBS programs, Power 5 programs, G5, like whatever it is, like you can go find, nobody was thinking Joey Aguilar could be the right fit for Tennessee, right? Where he was coming from. You did. That's because you have the mindset of proper evaluation and proper fit and development, but his skill set fits Josh
Yeah.
Heupel and
Much
what he
better than
wants
Nico.
to do, rather than Nico, right? So that's
And
what I
Sean,
mean by
honestly,
the
that
science of it.
decision to go with Nico over Joey Aguilar got Deshaun Foster fired. I don't think UCLA's as bad as they are if they still had Joey Aguilar quarterback. He bought into the big arm, the recruiting hype, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that he was going to probably not going to make it at UCLA anyway, but I think it expedited that process.
Yeah.
You know,
I just really think what you said, it is something that I think, I don't know if it's an impact of the general managers in that position coming into play.
Because teams are starting to expand that role, the back office role of, hey, do your homework. You know what quarterbacks we're going to go like to pursue. Start doing your homework in July, August, September, October. Call the high school coaches. Talk to the agents. Talk to people that know these kids. Do the background checks. Find out what kind of young men they are. So that way, when they do jump in the portal, we know what we're getting ourselves into. I think the expansion of the back offices has played a big role in that because, Sean, and this is a point you made to me before the show started, and these two things tied together. You and I were pointing out that you're seeing a lot more, or we're talking about, you brought it up. You're seeing a lot more teams that are transfer oriented being successful this year than last year. Indiana was really one of the few exceptions last year. But the point we made on that is, a lot of the kids that came over from Indiana came with the head coach. And so it was a little different. There was a lot of portal heavy teams last year that were absolute busts. And even some teams that maybe aren't as good as people thought they were going to be, like LSU. I don't think LSU struggles are because they didn't do well in the portal. In fact, if LSU didn't have such a great portal class on defense, I don't know if they're even 3-1 right now. So their defensive overhaul has a lot to do with great evaluation and recruiting of the secondary players. You got to give them credit for that. The kids they brought in the second have been perfect fits for what they're doing and have played at a high level. You look at Notre Dame and Malachi Fields and the job he's done. The Ty Washington and the job he's done in this offense, even just as a role player. Jared Dawson, when he hasn't been banged up, has played at a high level. And now nobody's perfect, but you just look at what teams are doing, and you look at teams like Vanderbilt, who the portal has greatly impacted Vanderbilt, but they were smart enough to say, we're not going to win with 1-year transfer guys. We need to go out and get guys that have 2-3 years of left of eligibility. Getting Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers for a second year coming over from New Mexico State has had a big impact on that Vanderbilt football team as opposed to just getting the one and dones. Now, I don't know that they thought Diego Pavia was going to be a 2-year guy. But Eli Stowers definitely was supposed to be a 2-year guy. And Diego Pavia is trying to get a 9th year and a 10th year. And that guy just wants to be in college for the rest of his life, apparently. But, which I don't blame him because he's not an NFL quarterback. So why not, if you can win a court case and keep playing, why not? I think it's ridiculous, but I understand where he would come from. I do think, to your point, Sean, teams are making smarter decisions when it comes to the portal, because they're investing more resources into evaluating young people in the portal, evaluating film, practice film, game film, talking to people, and understanding that we got to make sure we've got to bring in the right type of players as well. I think you also are seeing some trends where there are still some positions, however, where more than one guy, maybe two, is going to be not going to be beneficial. And I know offensive line is still one of those. That's still a position where I just don't think you can rebuild entirely through the portal. No. Look at Ohio State, for example. Ohio State brought in 2 portal guys, but they made those 2 portal guys compete with guys that are already there. They weren't just building their entire, future of playing on offense this year around these 2 portal guys. And if they're good, we're going to be good. But if they struggle, our tackle position is going to be a hot mess. They brought over Phillip Daniels and brought over the kid from Rice, but they didn't just hand those kids the job. Phillip Daniels won a job, but then the kid from Rice got beat out by Austin Sareveld, a homegrown kid. And so now you're seeing that offensive line's playing solid football. But it's not completely rebuilt through the portal. They've brought in a different portal guy each year, which has been impactful. Seth McLaughlin last year, and then Josh Johnson the year before. But you're not seeing the complete rebuilds that you've seen in the past. And I think teams are starting. But the thing is, Shaun, this was a crapshoot when they all first started this. It's a complete crapshoot. I don't know what works. I can't rely on history. I can't rely on trends. So when you talk about trends, it's not that all of a sudden the portal's better for no reason whatsoever. The trend is teams that are successful are making smarter decisions about who they go get and who they bring in. They're focusing more on fit on the roster and in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big part of it.
And it goes to what you said, talking about the continuity with Cignetti and the players he brought. You just don't assume. That was an assumption early on in the portal. Oh, let's go raid Alabama's roster. Let's go raid Georgia's roster. Let's just go raid the big time programs rosters and just make the assumption that those are going to be dudes for us. And it was poor evaluation. And then you go and you put all this money into those players that aren't what you expect them to be. Now you see somebody like Cignetti bring players over in the portal that people probably would have looked over, and you see their production going up against top competition. You say to yourself, maybe we need to scour and open up, the guys that we actually look at in the portal. Maybe we can find some guys that can come and play. At Michigan, their championship year, they brought a guy in from Coastal Carolina to play on the defensive line, and he fit into what they were doing on the defensive line, a dominant defensive line.
Their nickel or one of their starting corners on their title team, I believe, came from UMass.
Yeah.
Right? Aren't I correct on that, Shaun?
I believe you're correct, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. What was that kid's name? Keep going, Shaun. I'll find out if I'm
No, I think that is something that even we recognize. The success that Notre Dame, of course, they went and got, Devontae Smith from Alabama, but, getting Jordan Clark from Arizona State, going and getting guys in back-to-back years from Northwestern, in the defensive backfield. It is all about, fit. Now, Malachi Fields, for all of his physical traits, was the right fit for Notre Dame and what they needed to take that next step offensively. It wasn't just like he was a name. He was the right fit as well. And so I think Notre Dame has always kind of approached the portal in that manner. And I think when the portal opened, there was a pace to it, in a sense. There wasn't a lot of science to it. Wasn't a lot of thinking to it, really. And I think now coaches, maybe the money aspect has become, because, if people are saying, yo, you spent money on this kid and he's not even starting for us. Like, what's going on with that? Now, those decisions are being eyeballed a little bit differently. It's probably a lot of different aspects that have led to it, but I just think the science of it and how it's a fit for your program and for your roster is being taken a lot more seriously than it was.
Josh Wallace was from UMass. He was this corner we talked about.
Yeah.
I think part of it, Shaun, is just more experience in the system, but I also think part of it is teams are looking at who's winning in college football right now and how are they doing it. Michigan didn't avoid the portal. Ohio State didn't avoid the portal. Notre Dame didn't avoid the portal. But they were smart about it. They got the right fits. They made sure they were getting character guys. I mean, nobody that watched Ohio State last year can question, was Will Howard a character fit at Ohio State? Like you could if you went and got Jaden Rashada. You know what I mean? Or who was the other kid that's the kid that's been at like 6 different schools? Not TJ Finley. Kid used to be at Miami, Jake Garcia. I mean, you look at the kid that Kentucky got this year, Zach Kolkata. And I'm like, that's not going to go well. No. Like that's a no-brainer. That's not going to go well. But look, maybe Will Howard doesn't have the talent of a Nico or a Jaden Rashada or a Zach Kolzada, but he's a better fit. Riley Leonard's a better fit. And Cam Ward ended up being a great fit, which I didn't know if he would at the time, but he ended up being a great fit. That was a much better Miami team with him there. But what you're seeing, Shaun, is they were using the portal to fill holes and fill needs, not to to revamp their entire roster. And I think the teams that have looked and said, that doesn't mean you have to have the same number of players, but more so of you've got to make sure that those guys are fitting into what's already there. You have to establish your culture, which was already there, and then add to it. You can't just build and I think that, we saw this with Mike Norvell. The types of players he went after this offseason are a little bit different than the players he went after last offseason. But even then, I think also what you saw with Georgia and in Michigan, but especially with Notre Dame and Ohio State last year. Yeah, they both went after key portal pickups. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't sacrifice their returning players for that. Ohio State didn't win the title last year because of the transfer portal. With all due respect to Will Howard and Quinshon Judkins, they won the title last year because they had a program and they used their NIL money more so to make sure that the two defensive ends came back. That, getting Caleb Downs played a role. What I'm saying is you can add Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, and Will Howard. But if you don't bring back Jack Sawyer and JT and Josh Johnson for a second year and Travion Henderson and guys like that, then that's not going to be enough to win the title. It was, we're going to take care of our roster first, then go get the pieces that we need to complement our roster. Everybody was whining last year, Ohio State went out and bought a title. Well, I mean, yeah, most of it went to their players. They only had really 4 impact transfers last year, in my opinion. Caleb Downs, Seth McLaughlin, Will Howard, and Quinshon Judkins. Can you think of any other really impactful transfers they had on last year's team? There were some rotation guys, but am I missing somebody? Archer, tell me. Am I missing somebody? That's 4 guys.
I think that speaks to the strength of teams and programs that figure it out. More than anything, you need to build how you're going to retain your guys.
Right.
You can go out and get a guy. Talk about you can go out and get a guy for 2 years, but is he going to be gone after 1 year? And now,
right.
Wait, I'll tell you a kid that I feel like, I don't know what you saw. Because now the kids have to, that's going to be the next step in this thing. What's the evaluation going to be on the player side? Right? Because getting money is one thing. But dude, don't leave a worse situation. Like Eric Singleton, my man, you should have stayed at Georgia Tech.
Yep.
You should have asked some
grass isn't always
questions.
greener on the other side.
It's not always greener. I'm going to the SEC. Oh man, Jackson Arnold, Hayes King. Y'all just watch the film. If you had watched the film between the two last year, you would have seen it's either that or playing with a true freshman. And I'm the number 2 guy here behind Cam Coleman. Dude, you could have been at Georgia Tech, number 1 guy, winning games, doing your thing. That, for me, is the next step in this thing, the player evaluation. How do they view this thing? Does it start to – because I think both sides are going to be adjusting to one another, right? Because schools are going to be a little bit more diligent in who they give their money to, and that's going to impact possibly how players now, decide whether or not they're going to leave the school that they're at or the situation that they're at, or whether or not they choose another school over other contenders for their services. So
we are also seeing, Shaun, there are teams who are rebuilding almost exclusively through the portal who are also having success this year, and that's the unique thing. The quarterback thing is a greater version of what we saw last year, because you and I talked about this. There was a small impact to quarterback last year, volume standpoint, but the impact was for the 2 teams that played for the title. And I don't like there was the comment about Will Howard, I was going to commit to Notre Dame, but they took Riley Leonard. And I'm like, dude, you should be happy that they took Riley Leonard, because you were a better fit at Ohio State than you were at Notre Dame. And Riley Leonard was a better fit at Notre Dame than he was at Ohio State. They both went to the perfect place. And then they ended up meeting for the title game. And then, of course, what Cam Moore did at Miami. So that's kind of something that we've seen. What's kind of new, Shaun, is there are more teams so far that are showing success by rebuilding through the portal. And you're seeing that with, I mean, Texas Tech is obviously one of the biggest examples, Shaun, of teams that are rebuilding. But like even Syracuse, who kind of built through the portal last year and had to rebuild through the portal last year because their team got raided from the portal. And then all of a sudden how they looked. Yeah, they had the loss to Tennessee, but they were 2-1, 3-1 before Steve Angeli got hurt and they went out and got beat by Duke. They don't get beat by Duke 38-3 or whatever that was if Steve Angeli's not hurt. Because that team was just kind of rocked, and I think they overlooked it. But like, I didn't think Syracuse is going to be 3-2 after 5 games, based on how last year went. So I think that's something that's also been kind of interesting, Shaun, is you are seeing more teams so far. Miami's another example that very heavy portal influence. It's paying off so far. The difference with Miami and Texas Tech is Miami's lines were still built around returners, not portal guys. They got the Bly kid at D tackle, but the rest of their lines were still built around the portal. But you can't ignore that Miami doesn't have a very heavy portal influence at certain positions. But there's also their quarterback is new. They've got new receivers, new secondary, new linebacker, but returners at running back, returners at receiver also, returner at tight end, returner mostly on the D line. And so there's that mix, that blend of what we've seen. But Florida State is a brand new football team. We said in the preseason, I don't have a clue what this team is going to be. No clue. Well, so far so good for Florida State. We'll find out more this weekend. But, that's another team that went out and rebuilt through the portal, and they've looked pretty darn good doing it. So I think that's something that's a little bit unique this year too, Shaun, is Maryland's had some success in the portal and a true freshman quarterback. But Maryland had not Maryland, Missouri their portal pickups have been Damian Wilson at defensive end. You talk about Bo Perbula at quarterback. Like they've had a very heavy portal influence this year that's resulted in some success. So I think the other part, the final part of it too, Shaun, that I'll say that I think that has happened in the portal is, and by the way, their stud running back this year is a portal kid that they got from Louisiana Monroe. To your point, they weren't going and looking for some retread from Alabama and Georgia. Not that that's wrong, because go ask Michigan what it's like to get a transfer from Alabama and have them at running back. But it's like those aren't the only guys you can win with. So they get a backup quarterback from Penn State and a starting running back at Louisiana Monroe, and their backfield looks pretty darn good so far. What I think you're seeing is teams are getting smarter, to your point, about how to go rebuild in the portal. It's not just about acquisition of talent. It's more fit. Do they fit what we're trying to do? James Blanchard's talked about this. It's not just throwing money at players. You got to make sure you're bringing in the right players. But it helps when you can rebuild around a veteran quarterback. And that's something that's helped Texas Tech with Baron Morton at quarterback. But then he gets knocked out of the Utah game and their backup quarterback comes in and plays well. So the portal, I think teams are getting more and more comfortable with how to properly, some more teams are getting more comfortable on how to properly build through the portal. But the fact that there's other success stories now, you can look at those teams and say, what did they do? What did they do? How can we learn from that and build that way and build rightly, because you're getting more data. It's like with anything, Shaun, if you start a business and nobody else has done it before, you're just kind of, let's give it a whirl, see how it goes. But when you're jumping into a business where there's a evidence of other successful people, you can say, okay, what lessons can we learn and apply from those people? We're not going to copycat them, but what are the lessons that resulted in their success that we think we can replicate here? And I think that's part of what we're saying as well, Shaun. And that's why I think this year. Now, what we're going to find out next year is this just a unique thing to this year, or is this a continuing trend in college football? That's something I'm curious about as well. And if the one portal window holds up, how does that impact things? Because if they get rid of the spring portal window, that's going to shake up how you defend how you handle things. Now, certain portal guys are still going to be there. David Bailey from Stanford still was going to be a spring transfer guy because the rule is still there. Even with the new window, if your coach gets fired, you can still jump into the portal. So Emmett Mosley still would have been there. David Bailey still would have been there. So it's been fascinating to watch that play out, Shaun. It really has. Final one for me, Shaun. one thing that we called before the season, and there's some things we got right, some things we got wrong. It's been a crazy season. One thing we got right is you and I said there's going to be, and Trev did as well, there's going to be a changing of the guard at quarterback in college football this year. And it may not be who everybody thinks it's going to be. And that has certainly been true. Certainly been true as we get through this first part of the season. And it's it hasn't been Arch Manning. It hasn't been DJ Lagway. It hasn't been Garrett Nussmeier. It hasn't even necessarily been Bryce Underwood, who's just kind of managed the game. He'll eventually get there, but he hasn't been that guy yet. It's obviously CJ Carr's part of that. Jade Maeva, the way he's playing. Diego Pavia, Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore. You're seeing a Ty Simpson who's been outstanding so far this year. Damon Williams. You're John Mateer, Julian Sayin, Chandler Morris. You are seeing a changing of the guard where there's new blood in college football, especially some of the younger players. And that's what's been exciting to me is watching the CJ Carrs, the Julian Sayins, the Damon Williams, the younger quarterbacks that are stepping in. And Bryce Underwood will get there. They're just smartly not putting the world on his shoulders so far at Michigan, which is wise. He'll get there, but you see it now. Like the college football is going through like I said, a changing of the guard. There's a new generation of quarterbacks coming up, and I think it bodes well for college football. But I think it could potentially, this is very early, bode well for the NFL as well. Because some of these guys that we're talking about, I do think are not the typical college system quarterbacks that struggle with the NFL transition. Some of them are. Damon Williams is not a NFL guy, with his body type and stuff. But you look at the CJ Carrs, you look at the Dante Moores and guys like that. Going in the season, who did everybody think was going to be the top quarterbacks in the country? It was going to be Cade Klubnik, who struggled, Arch Manning, who struggled, DJ Lagway, who struggled, Lenore Sellers, who struggled, Garrett Nussmeier, who struggled. Like all the guys that people thought were going to be the studs at quarterback this year have not been very good. And in his step to Jade Maeva, Dante Moore, CJ Carr, Fernando Mendoza, guys like that. And that's been a lot. Andrew Gilmore, Bear Bachmeier, into a very weird, unfortunate situation where that quarterback gets kicked off the team and leaves, and then he's forced to start as a true freshman, and BYU's undefeated. So that's been one of the more fun aspects of college football this year is because what Steve Angeli was doing at Syracuse. That's been Devin Dampier at Utah. It's just the quarterback position is just nothing like what it was a year ago or what people thought it was going to be like coming into the season. And that's made this season a lot of fun for me, Shaun. What say you as we get close to wrapping this thing up?
Man, I'm going to be honest with you. Just hearing you say that, I think there's been a tremendous shift, and I think it hits home for Notre Dame. I think there was a shift at Notre Dame on the type of quarterback that they would go after a little bit over 3 years ago that is kind of yielding success on the field for Notre Dame. We talked about the portal impact and how you go about looking for quarterbacks that actually fit what it is that you want to do instead of going and getting a guy that is a square peg in a round hole in a sense from as much as you want to talk about Riley Leonard, he fit Notre Dame's team last year. He fit that. That was just a shrewd move. I think they thought it would be a little bit better in certain areas in performance, but he fit.
But I think he was Notre also Dame's better in other areas than they thought as well.
Than they thought, yeah. So he fit, and we talked about and gave examples of the quarterbacks that are having success that fit. But for me, I just think it goes to the resurgence to the quarterback position being viewed more in a traditional sense. I think people fell in love with the Tebow, Cam Newton era of quarterbacks and tried to replicate a lot of different things. And now, it is now foundationally, let's go find guys that can spin it. And if they are great athletes, then that's an added bonus. rather than going and get these great athletes and like, man, now hopefully we can develop their passing game, which was in vogue for a long time. It really was.
And I don't think
So
teams are necessarily saying, well, we want pocket passers now. I
no,
think what they're saying is we value having guys can drop back and throw the
back in
football
play
in a
football.
non-air raid fashion, that they can read defenses and distribute the ball, and realizing like, yeah, it's great to have a Tebow and a Cam Newton, but those guys are rare. It's a little easier to find a Joe Burrow than it is to find a Cam Newton, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I'm not saying it's easy that Joe Burrow's just growing trees, but what I'm saying is guys that can light it up throwing the football it's easier to find the next Baker Mayfield than it is to find the next Kyler Murray. That's an example that I use for like Oklahoma. That doesn't mean that Baker Mayfield wasn't great. It just means I think it's more sustainable with that type of player than it is to try to find this other type of guy. And I think Notre Dame did that, and I've enjoyed watching this team play, but this was kind of the vision for Marcus Friend. This is why they didn't go to the portal.
Yeah.
This is why CJ Carr is your starting quarterback. If Kenny Minchie was their starting quarterback, he might be running a little bit more, but we kept telling people Kenny is a athletic drop back quarterback. He's not a runner. And Steve Angeli was a guy that was going to do damage from the pocket. That's who they went in the spring saying, these three guys are who we're going to battle with, and it's because they all can throw the football. And, the guy that throws the football as well as anybody at Notre Dame since Jimmy Clausen is the guy that won the job. If we're just talking about just as a thrower. You see that video they put out the other day, Shaun, of all his passes?
Yeah.
Just watch the way the ball comes out of his hand. You're like, dude, that's different. That's really different. It's fun to watch him throw. But you're seeing that a lot of places, and that's what's been fun this year. Is this because I like the fact that there's a lot of young quarterbacks that like we're going to see these guys for at least one more year.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to see Bryce Underwood for at least 2 more years, and I hopefully they all stay where they're at. I hope we see Dante Moore for 1 more year. I think Dante would be very smart to stay 1 more year at Oregon. So that's what's going to make it fun, and it's going to make next year very different preseason talk than what this year was. So anyway, Shaun, any final thoughts? Any things that you've seen? I think one thing I'll say is the ACC has been more disappointing than I thought it was going to be. The Big 12 has had some disappointing teams, but there's a lot more teams that I like in the Big 12 than I'm disappointed by. I think the Big 12 is a lot better this year. I think it's a very clear, so far, a very clear Big 10 is number 1 based on what they have at the top. SEC is number 2, but they're the deepest league. Big 12 is clearly number 3, and the ACC is clearly number 4. That has been a very disappointing league after the first couple teams. I think Miami's really good. I think Florida State's pretty good. I still don't know what Louisville is. We're going to find out, but like overall, there's some bad teams in the ACC.
I do think you want to talk about the transition with the quarterbacks and changing of the guard. Are we witnessing a changing of the guard in the ACC?
Potentially.
That's a potential. I think prior to that Steve Angeli, I think Fran Brown is building something because of his relatability. I hope he does as well. I hope he does as well.
I want to see fewer coaches jumping around all over the place because that's true. What you said earlier, Shaun, about transfer kids is also true for coaches, y'all.
Yeah.
Randy Edsall never recovered from making the wrong coaching decision.
Oh man.
Tom O'Brien never recovered from making the wrong coaching decision.
Nope.
You take these jobs and you may never recover from it. There's been coaches that leave for jobs and you're just like, that guy was a hot name. What would Dan Hawkins be like if he decided to stay at Boise for a few more years?
State,
Colorado,
and the coach at Rutgers, if he had just stayed there the first time,
if he just stayed exactly.
Where would that program be right now?
Exactly. There's a lot of coaches that have made moves like that, taking the wrong job, and you're just like, dude, it's not gonna fit real
well. Hey, what we're benefiting if Brett Bielema had stayed at Wisconsin, instead of leaving for Arkansas.
Yep.
Illinois is benefiting from it, but where Wisconsin is?
Yeah, and where would he be? I mean, I think his status would be a little bit different. Maybe he's not at Illinois. Maybe he would have got one of these big time jobs that came open these last few years.
Mm-hmm.
So it is interesting. The grass is not always greener, and you're seeing some coaches learn that. And I hope that Fran Brown is one of those guys. I hope he loves it in New York and stays there for a while. I want to see more coaches staying and building where they are. I get like a John Sumner or an Alex Golesh leaving a South Florida Tulane because just the money and resources are not the same. But Syracuse isn't those programs. But you're correct. I mean, the job he's done this year, Syracuse, they're better than I thought they were going to be, and they have a completely rebuilt team.
Yeah, is Miami?
Miami, yeah.
Are they on the verge of becoming the king of the hill?
What about
Louisville?
Yeah. Clemson's fallen off. Dabo's going to have to do a complete rebuild in certain ways in order to get them back on track. Like this year was brutally bad. And you just listen to him in press conferences, and it's like, dude, Dabo knows he messed this one up.
Yeah, he does.
He knows he messed this one up. And I think schools are learning maybe you shouldn't fire a coach so quickly. Somebody in the chat just brought up Raymond Harden. What if Florida doesn't fire Dan Mullen? I mean.
Yeah.
Like they haven't recovered from that. So, I hopefully that people start taking lessons from that. Unfortunately, I don't think they will, because at the end of the day, portal, coaches, money talks with too many people, and that's the unfortunate thing. But yeah, Shaun, the ACC is completely up for grabs for who's going to become the big dogs, and I hope it's not just one team. I hope it's not like I don't want Miami to go out there and just annihilate Florida State this weekend. I don't want Miami to become the new Clemson in that they're so much better than everybody else. I want the ACC to get back to where there's 4 or 5 teams that are pretty good that any given year could win it. I don't want Miami. Florida State dominated it forever, like every year won it. Then Clemson dominated it forever, and then it's like that random one year where a Pitt wins it or something, like Georgia Tech wins it or something. But I want it to be a thing where it's a battle every year, man. Boy, this Florida State Miami game every year has title implications, and Clemson gets back to being good, and NC State's good, and Louisville's good, and Syracuse or whatever. It'd be awesome if like some of the old Big East teams could get back to being really good in the ACC. I think that would make the league a lot better. But right now that league is struggling, and I think part of it is because they just don't have good enough coaches in that league. If I'm being real with you, I question is Pat Narduzzi that guy? Looking at some of these other coaches, Bill O'Brien, we'll see. I had my questions about that being a fit. You look at North Carolina. Everybody's talking. I'm not shocked at all by what's happening in North Carolina. This is kind of how I thought it was going to go.
Yeah.
Dave Dorn has proven to be just an average football coach.
Yeah.
He wastes talent. He's done it his whole career. I mean, you just don't have enough good coaches in that league. Where you look at the Big 12, and I'm like, dude, there's some really good football coaches in the Big 12, Shaun. I mean, Matt Campbell's doing a great job there. Kenny Dillingham, Katani Salaki's doing a great job there. Willie Fritz is a very underrated coach. You've got Kyle Willingham, Lance Leopold doing a great job there. Sonny Dykes has led his team to a championship game. There's really good football. Rich Rod's now in the league. His team right now is not very good. We'll see what he can do. What can Coach Sanders do? I mean, there's some other coaches. Chris Kleiman, I would have put in that category, but the job he's done this year has not been great. Dave Aranda, I'm not sure about, and it's Joey McGuire, correct? I always want to say Joey Malone for some reasons. Joey McGuire's turned out to be a heck of a hire at Texas Tech right now.
And so they kept their word. They kept their word to their GM candidate. He was a candidate for the GM job at Notre Dame. They kept their word. They said, we're going to invest. We're going to pour money into this program and give you resources. Yep. And they've done it. Number one portal. You see, like, they're landing like top 5-star people and the athletes in the 2026 classes. Texas Tech is really trying to make an imprint, So,
yep. But you can bring all the talent you want in, Shaun, but if they're not being coached well and developed well, you're not going to win. This is why I think the whole Jimmys and Joes and X's and O's debate, it's another one of those useless debates. It's not the Jimmys and Joes only. It's not X's and O's only. You need both.
Yeah.
You need both. And that's, because Syracuse has had more talented teams than the one they have now.
Yeah.
They have. They were never consistent. with how they were coached and developed, and whether that was Coach Babers or, you know, in past years before him. And so those are things that you look at and see, and I think that's partly why the Big 12 is. I mean, there's rosters in the Big 12 that aren't great, but they're playing well because they're coached well. I think that's really helped the league. I think the SEC in recent years has brought in some, like, I think the head coaching is upgraded in the SEC in recent years. You know, Lane Kiffin's maturing as a coach. Eli Drinkwitz has turned out to be a better coach than I thought. The Clark Lee hire turned out to be a great hire. You know, Mike Elko, we thought was going to be a great hire. It's turned out to be a great hire. You know, with the job Kalen DeBoer has done. You know, Brian Kelly is an overrated coach from what people perceived him, but he's a good football coach.
He's a good football coach.
You know, he's going to have you winning 8 to 10, 11 games every year. I mean, he's a good football coach. If you know, you just kind of go up and down the league. The Big Ten, in my opinion, in recent years has upgraded its coaching. You know, Kurt Cignetti, great hire.
Yeah.
Dan Lanning, adding him into the league by, you know, obviously in a different way.
Right.
You know, I mean, you look at Brett Bielema, as you were talking about earlier, that Jonathan Smith was a very good hire. You know, so Jed Fish at Washington is a good football coach. I like the job Barry Odom's doing it at Purdue. It, you know, may not reflect it necessarily on the record. Greg Schiano and the job at Rutgers. I mean, that if the ACC wants to win, that's what these people need to look at. A, commit to providing resources for your football programs, and B, make sure you're making the right head coaching hires. And in some instances they have. I mean, look what the job that Jeff Brom has done at Louisville. I mean, he had them in the ACC title game 2 years ago. They won 9 games last year. They're 4-0 this year. Why? Because they brought in a good football coach. There's just not enough of those in the ACC. I didn't love the Brent Key hire at Georgia Tech, but it's turned out so far to be a pretty good one. There's just not enough of those in the ACC, Shaun. That's the issue. Yeah. That's the issue. So, Shaun, I wanted to bring this up before we leave. Well, actually, before we get at it, we want to thank everybody for being with us today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. We had a super chat here from Michael S. Could Boise State do a Northern Illinois type game by relying on the run and reducing game time? Notre Dame run defense seemed vulnerable against Arkansas. Michael, man, I love you, but like all your super chats lately have been some kind of this negativity thing. Could that happen? Of course it could happen. But here's the big difference between that. If you limit Notre Dame to 5 possessions in this game, you're still giving up in the 20s, if not 30s in points. That's what's different about this team. So the only way you're going to hold Notre Dame to 14 points is if Notre Dame just shoots themselves in the foot, which is like last year. Boise State didn't win that game last year because they reduced game time. Notre Dame lost that game last year because their offense couldn't do jack after the first series of the game. But yes, Michael, that could happen. If you want to focus on that could happen. I want to bring something else up here, Shaun, before we get out of here, from Lou Holtz, Thunder and Bolts. He says, Bryan and Shaun, prayers kindly requested. We just learned my father's health is rapidly declining and he will likely pass soon. Fatefully, we're already traveling from PA to Notre Dame for the game. My friend, I can't express to you more sympathy than that. I can promise you that Shaun and I will certainly be praying for you and your father and your family as a whole. My wife recently lost her father last week, and the stepdad who raised her. And I see the pain in her every day, and I can only imagine what you're going through right now, my friend. I pray that you guys have safe travel. I pray that you find comfort and peace. I pray that your father knows the Lord, and if he doesn't, that he does soon. But I just pray for comfort for your family, and I just pray for peace for your family, man. And I don't know what else to offer besides that. But I appreciate that you wanted to share that with us and the IB family. You are definitely a part of our family and our community, and we appreciate you. And you know, I'll spend some more time after this is over with. I know Shaun will as well. We'll be lifting you up. I can't imagine what it's like losing a parent. I've been fortunate to have. Both my parents are still with me. And Shaun, I know you know what that's like, losing your dad, and you can relate to what he's going through because you lost your dad recently. So, man, we love you, and we'll be praying for you and your whole family and for your father here. But just enjoy the time you have, anytime you may have with him, and just always try to remember to focus on the good memories and the good times, and don't let the sadness drown that out. And just remember to rely on that, and just continue to put your faith in the Lord. So we're with you, man. We'll be praying for you. And we'll be praying for you for sure. And drive safe to the game, and hopefully Notre Dame puts on a good show for you. And Andrew Gilmore, who's a longtime member, said he lost his dad in June. Andrew did know that. I'm sorry to hear that, brother, and we'll be praying for you as well. And so, like I said, I don't know what that's like, Shaun. I know you do, and I know it doesn't ever really go away. There's always that missing, that longing, but you start to focus more on the lessons and even still, Shaun, you and I'll talk, and you'll share with me lessons your dad taught you and things like that. That never goes away, no matter how sad you might feel in his loss. So,
I just encouragement and God's peace upon you and your entire family. And as Bryan said, it never goes away. But the one thing you can take some solace in is something that I remind myself each and every day, not to compare my dad by any means to our Lord and Savior, but a good man leaves an inheritance in many different ways to his children and their children's children. So I'm sure just with the expression that you've shared with us, the magnitude that your dad had on your life doesn't stop. It will not stop even when he's no longer here, because obviously he's done a great job being a dad and leaving an inheritance in so many different ways to you and your family. So continue to walk in that, continue to live in that, because it will bring you some semblance of joy and smiles and peace in the days to come. So,
praying for you, my dude. We'll talk to you guys again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.